Yeah. Okay.
Here, Stinson. Yeah, here. Stuck here. Willie.
We're going to start with a 5-minute citizen comment. Maybe again, we'll start this way.
You guys want to start? Sorry, I missed the question.
That's where we start.
Yeah. So outcome today was just a question if we really needed to put in an emergency ordinance. Yeah. Really, that's done. Yeah. All right. Well, it's gonna be a long one.
No.
You only get 5 minutes.
Okay. Travis Wardlaw, 81 Gray Squirrel. I'll start out just by saying, hey, I've been really watching and monitoring this. Like the meetings I couldn't attend remotely, I watched through the video stream and everything. I just wanted to say, one, thank you for discussing the grandfather clause for people who have a functioning and legit short-term rental license and stuff like that. And for the folks who've gotten caught in this turmoil when things went on the freeze, who are actually buying a property and working with you guys, et cetera. Thank you for putting some avenues in to keep that moving forward. A little bit about myself. For the last 30 years, I've done big level projects for a major corporation. Everything from enterprise software development and data analytics to telecoms infrastructure and fiber networks to oil and gas field automation in multiple states and even rail yards. And I'm saying that not to say, oh, that's an impressive thing. I work for a living just like everybody else. But I've managed these big, massive projects, and you guys are essentially the project manager for what's going on right now. And from what I've watched and rewatched some of these videos over and over, like, here's some constructive feedback I want you guys to hear, right? We're deviating from the goal. Like, this thing started out with 3 problems. We had some people who weren't compliant with their licensing and their taxes. You had some bad actors, right? And you had no way to really track that data, right? And so I know there was a big discussion about why it's an emergency. We're in an emergency now, right? So we're shut down, right, for administering a new license. But at the end of the day, what I've seen over my years of experience is people usually get into these modes when they start sitting into the discussion periods. They get into what's the smart thing to do, what's the right thing to do, and we start doing this churning. We start adding complexity, right? When the analogy on a ship is like the rudder doesn't work unless the ship's moving. The most effective way to get the changes you want is to make subtle changes and take action. Did we get the right results? Make another subtle change, take some action. So what I've seen so far is all this discussion about like zoning and I'm actually glad that you're looking at the data. That's amazing. You solved one of the problems by selecting the software and moving forward with that. That's going to turn some data and some really valuable information for you, right? But a lot of this other stuff, I call it churn. At the end of the day, you guys talk less than 1% about how to enforce the rules. Like the problem is you haven't been able to enforce the rules that you already have on the books, right? People aren't paying their taxes. People aren't coming up and getting a license secured like the proper way. You have renters that are showing up, having parties, throwing trash in your yard, stuff like that, with no real vehicle for you guys to actually impact the people. Like all this stuff here is really, you're still focusing on the homeowner. When you got a few bad actors out there, one being people who aren't doing things the right way and getting their licenses and paying their taxes. 2, which the software is going to help tremendously, two are the actual bad actors. Like the example, I think you mentioned there was trash in your yard from a short-term rental. Like, why couldn't we call the cops and have $1,000 fine initially given to that person right on the spot, right? Or tell them they had to leave. Like, I don't want bad people staying in my house, because if they're bad actors outside of the house, they're probably causing damage inside the house. And so I would just assume if I found out something like that was happening, they'd be made to go, right? I don't want them. I want to be a good neighbor, because my plan is to be here within 2 years. I'm planning on retiring in 2 years. And I bought my retirement house. I just can't move here yet, right? Maybe one day I'll sit on one of these seats. But at the end of the day, like, if the things you're discussing and talking about enacting, if you haven't enabled this man and his team to show up at someone's house and issue a strict fine on the person that's causing the problem, like the poor lady who had someone vomiting and doing lewd behavior in the driveway in the middle of the day, like, why wasn't that person given a strict fine and then or sent out of town? Like, that's what we need. Like, if we, and that's what I keep coming back to. We spent just very little time talking about enforcement. And at the end of the day, if we don't, the town people who live here are going to be frustrated. The people who have short-term rentals are still going to be frustrated. And then you guys are still going to be frustrated because we haven't moved forward. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm Laura Wardlaw with 81 Gray Squirrel. We covered some of the things, and I just was curious if, limiting the occupancy, limiting the number of days or the minimum stays on, just some of the things I saw on the agenda tonight. It was like, are we losing sight of what are the problems that the officer is actually encountering? And I was up here a couple of weeks ago that I couldn't make it to that meeting that night because we were leaving town, that he was showing me, he was actually surprised how many short-term rentals we had. And even though 60% of them, of the issues are short-term rental issues, I think once he was surprised at how many short-term rentals we actually have, I think we're actually having less issues maybe than would be expected for this number of short-term rentals. So that's just something to consider. And I'm just worried, like Travis had alluded to, that we're going to make all these changes. We're going to get a year or two down the road, 2028, 2029, and some of the same problems are not going to have been addressed by the solutions that we're talking about tonight. And then I'd ask you to also consider, I know we've been a little late to the game. Breckenridge made a lot of changes a few years ago. Telluride, all these big towns had made changes years ago. Have you looked at the fact that some of them are turning around? Telluride has dropped their caps because what they saw was a drop in tourism. Breckenridge is now, I think it was this week, they were asking for $6 million increase in property taxes to help because of the shortages. So we just need to make sure that we're like trailing behind people and making these massive changes, and now they may actually be turning around and we're going to be late to the game turning around possibly too. So we have the advantage of kind of seeing what some of these forerunners did, and did it actually have the impact they thought it was going to have. So that's my concern, is are we actually going to solve the problems we're here to solve with these changes that we're making? Are the people that are already violating and not having a license, like they're still not going to have a license probably. You're going to enact all these rules, abiding by the rules. We'll either be able to stay in business or not because we want to play by the rules. But people that don't have a license are still going to operate with a license, and what are you going to do then? And are we addressing that with the current stuff that you're covering tonight? I think that's it for me. Thank you. That was quick.
Thank you. Yes.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay. I think it was about a year ago.
Mind take your name for the record.
Mike, so
Okay, thank you.
985 Whispering Pines. About a year ago, I guess you folks decided to address the problem of short-term rentals. And I guess what you did was you increased the cost of a license considerably. And I was fine with that, actually, because I thought, well, because you folks said you're going to substantially increase enforcement. And I thought enforcement would be good. Okay, and so I had to pay the extra tax, but it seems like we forgot about enforcement and moved right to the issue of caps and everything that's been discussed for the last 6 months. So why aren't we giving enforcement a chance? That's a question I have. Because he said something about it, she said something about it. you know, we're why aren't we giving it a chance? Another, I suspect you all know that our HOA over here has, maybe we're the only community that has actually conducted a referendum. Our board actually put out an amendment to our covenants. And I could be wrong on this, but I believe that amendment, that it would cap the number of licenses for our HOA here at 30. And that would be about 41% that would be in the amendment. 41%, 30 licenses. That, I have a feeling that's going to be overwhelmingly rejected by our owners. Okay. If it is overwhelmingly rejected, and we'll know in a week, how does that influence you guys? Because so our community doesn't want the cap at 30 licenses or 41%. I think it's a safe assumption that we want a higher number in our community. So how, and by the way, somebody can answer some of the questions that I'm asking here. How would something like that affect what you folks are doing with regard to caps and number of nights and stuff like that? When you have a community that clearly wants more than 30 licenses in their community.
It's a one-way dialogue in the 5-minute cup of coffee.
Okay. But I do want to ask a question. Does this board have the right to completely shut down short-term rentals?
I can answer yes.
Okay, good. I thought so. So then this board probably has the authority to limit the number of nights. And if you want to get rid of the bad actors, maybe you limit and the corporate owners, maybe you limit the number of nights. I rent my place at 985, about 15 to 20 nights a year. And I don't think I'm causing any problems. But I know that there are, and I'm part of the community for sure. I feel like I'm part of the community. Some of these owners, as we know, have nothing to do with the community. They just want to rent 360 nights a year. When somebody talks about bad actors, I think they're talking about those kind of owners that are not part of the community and don't take care of their place. And they just have bad renters, a lot of bad renters. So a way to fix that would be limit the number of nights that a license can have. If it's 120 nights a year, 150, whatever, but whatever it is, if it's under 200, that's going to, the corporate owners are not going to be very happy, I don't think. And maybe they won't even buy in Blue River if they can't rent 360 nights a year. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possible solution. And another interesting thing is, what about transferring a license? If you're going to be putting real severe caps on some of these communities, maybe to solve the problem of people selling their places, maybe a license could be transferred, and eventually, if you'll reach your cap. If I sell my place and my buyer is not interested in renting, he won't get a license, and so then there'll be one less license.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric Badler, 317 West Main Pines. I had 2 points. One was I looked at the 208 licenses on the database, and I see 28 in our neighborhood, but there's word around town that it's something more than that, something maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 more than what that 28 is. And I don't know that. Second point was, I prefer, instead of a number of licenses capped, do the number of nights, because I think, as he pointed out, it would restrict the investors, the people with more than one house, people that rent it 365 days a year and don't ever visit. Case in point is unincorporated Breckenridge. We have some friends up there. They have a 35 booking limit. And every quarter, they have to send in a report of how many bookings they had. So it's kind of a self-reporting thing that might help with workload. So that's all.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Schmidt. I live at 53 Mariposa. I watched the replay of the meeting from last week, whatever it was, and I want to take issue with something that Ted said. He made it sound like everybody who rents, excuse me, short-term rental, they're here because it's a business. Okay, I live here. My home's here, and I spent winter in Arizona. But my home is Blue River, so this is I short-term my home during the winter. And this is not a business to me. This helps me maintain the lifestyle that I've got here that I absolutely love, Blue River. So it's definite, and I'm sure I'm not the only one like that. That it's not, this is not a business for me. This is just something to help me maintain my lifestyle. The other thing I took away from the meeting is that the impression I got from everybody on the board was that living in Blue River is a hellscape. That it's just absolutely gone to hell with all these short-term rentals. And I live in Mariposa, and my wife and I walk the neighborhood all the time, and I honestly couldn't tell you which of the houses are short-term rentals and which are permanent and which are long-term rentals. It's a phenomenal place to live. Not denying that there are issues. I mean, everything is pointed out, but I don't agree with the vision that people have that this is just absolutely horrible place to be. It was brought up before, and I want to reinforce it. I've been short-term renting my home during the winter for 4 seasons now, and I've never had a code infraction, and I've never had a neighbor complain to me about noisy renters. It's been perfect. I mean, I've had any damage to the house. It's been phenomenal. And what I'm afraid of is that we're taking the bad actors that we've talked about, the non-licensed people and the short-term rentals, and they're going to wind up penalizing people like me who are not part of the problem. And I don't want to see the problem people impact me. I didn't hear the last time, but I guess that you guys are considering grandfathering things in. And what was concerning to me was that if you go to whatever the number is, 50%, 25%, 0, that those of us who have licenses are just going to get wiped out tomorrow. And I think that's totally unfair for those of us who came here for the lifestyle but want to use the income to help us get there to just wipe that out. You're going to make these homes unaffordable to a lot of the residents that are here. And I think that's something that should be addressed. Term owners should be grandfathered in. So if you set a number, then as people sell their homes, if somebody mentioned transferring the licenses, maybe you don't transfer licenses. If you're at 28% now and you want to get down to 25, you keep getting rid of licenses until you hit the 25. Then you can start issuing. I think that's what they're doing in Breckenridge. So that's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ron Izzetti and my family owns 566 Highway 9. We've rented and then owned a Blue River since 2020. We previously owned 285 Davis Court, had a short-term rental permit there, and sold for a bigger home in October of last year. This home had long-term renters, so we waited to apply for a short-term rental permit while waiting for their lease to end, hoping to be able to enjoy the home ourselves, and like many, rent it out when not there in public expenses. I applied on April 21st, not knowing that there was a moratorium passed, as there is nothing on the website indicating so. My permit was denied because of the moratorium on May 27th. There's still no information posted on the town licensing site indicating that there is a moratorium. The emergency moratorium and the unknowns caused by it have caused significant financial stress on myself and family, as we do not know when it will be lifted or when lifted, if we'll have the opportunity to receive any sort of short-term rental license. We can continue to long-term rent the property, but then give up the ability to enjoy the property ourselves. Most of the issues on the analysis that led to the emergency moratorium was the license number not being listed on the advertisement. Although a violation of the ordinance, I'm struggling to connect advertising violations with the need for a zone-based cap on short-term rentals, rather than finding and potentially suspending the licenses of existing licensing holders until brought into compliance as allowed by current ordinance. At multiple meetings, there was talk of people who are renting without permits, yet a core request shows that no violations have been sent to unregistered short-term permits since May 18th. I worry that an analysis highlighting mostly advertising concerns has led to a moratorium that is now leading to whole-scale changes in the short-term rental program, rather than enforcing the existing rules and regulations that already exist and have just changed in Blue River in November 2025, less than a year ago. Previously, Blue River has talked about wanting to discuss caps and limits on short-term rentals once over the 28% or 30% mark. That's why I'm surprised to see in an earlier meeting that 15% may be where the final ordinance lands, below where we are today and below where Blue River has historically been over the past few years. A cap and the inability to short-term rent at all, with the potential for years-long waiting lists, will impact the town's revenue as it receives a significant amount of its revenue from lodging and related sales taxes, and may also impact property values, as this will be the first time in years that buying a home in Blue River does not come with the privilege of being able to obtain a short-term rental permit. Most importantly, it seems that all the concerns are around a small number of problem properties and limited enforcement. I hope the town would focus first on enforcement of existing ordinances before building out a complex zone-based cap system that may not address any of the issues currently brought up by residents. Particularly when you think of homes like mine that are on Highway 9, a zone-based system doesn't seem to make much sense. In keeping up with the proposed changes over the past few meetings, there's been a lot of concern around properties that are 365-day short-term rentals. I want to raise the fact that a 15% cap means that 85% of Blue River homes have no ability to short-term rent their home, while 15% have the ability to rent an unlimited amount. It seems like the town is grandfathering in the potential problem properties and removing the ability for people with primary or second homes to rent them out for less than 30 days at a time, perhaps for years. If the town wants to maintain its residential character, I would love to hear more discussion around how the program can enable a family with a second home in Blue River to short-term rent their home for a limited time and use those funds to help pay for increasing utility costs, taxes, and insurance, while ensuring sales and lodging taxes are paid to the town and remaining compliant in the program. I suggest that there maybe be another type of license that is not subject to the cap, with a maximum of, let's say, 60 days, where a home could be short-term rented annually. These licenses could be a separate type rather than the unlimited, and ideally at a reduced cost. These are the sorts of proposals that can ensure Blue River maintains its residential character. To summarize my asks, can the town post a notice about the moratorium on its site so that residents are aware that there is one? Will the town consider those that have applied for a permit just after the moratorium for preference on any future wait lists? Do advertising violations truly justify an emergency moratorium? Will the town send out violation notices to those with short-term program violations, particularly those that are not even registered? Is a short-term rental cap the best way to protect the interests of the town and its residents? Or can the town first start with some measure of enforcement before needing to move to a more extreme solution, particularly one that keeps residents from getting a permit while allowing those with unenforced violations to be grandfathered in? If the town does move to the extreme solution of capped short-term rental permits, would they entertain a second type of permit that would allow families to rent their home for a limited number of nights a year? Thank you for your time and your efforts as you evaluate Blue River short-term rental program.
Hello, my name is Louisa Davis, and our home is 251 Gold Nugget Drive. My background, I owned a short-term rental management company in California for 15 years. And I sold it last year and moved here to Blue River. I don't plan on having a short-term rental management company here. I'm retired. But I worked a lot. All the things you're grappling with, Palm Springs, which is where we lived, and the 7 desert cities 5 years ago, they were having these same meetings. I ended up becoming very involved with 3 of the cities. And they made some very positive changes. And again, if compliance is an issue, what I learned from watching these three cities implement different programs is education for the homeowners and having them understand it as a privilege. Looked at the fine sheet, and I think you need to like quadruple the fines, because what happens is we encourage the homeowners to all have contracts with the guests that were coming, because the guests are mainly the issue. Yes, I looked, and a third of your owners don't have their license posted. I think with a phone call to them, probably almost all of them immediately would put the license on the website. They're out of compliance, but maybe they don't know it or they forgot to do it. I don't know. But I think there are ways, and fines I found, and each of the desert cities that we worked with found, that really helped solve a lot of the problems, because it made the owners realize you are serious. You may ban short-term rentals. That gets people's attention. And like, if you are advertising without a permit, it's a $5,000 fine, and they put a lien on your house. In 3 of the cities that I worked with, if you have a noise complaint, it's a $1,000 fine in 2 of the cities. So the fines are passed on through the contract to the guests, and they sign, like in my contract, in the house that we had there, they signed, they gave me their credit card, their security number, and it was a legal binding contract on DocuSign. In Palm Springs, there are 3,000 vacation rentals. They used to have like 2,000 citations a year. Now they have 1.25 citations a week, because they implemented very strict policies, and the owners realized they're going to ban short-term rentals. And again, we formed an organization for owners, and we helped each other, and we policed a lot of the, on the website to make sure people were in compliance, because we didn't want them to ban short-term rentals. So at least in La Quinta and in Palm Springs, and there have a vibrant short-term rental. The neighbors seem to be happy, and they're continuing that, but they put in some pretty strict policies, which I'm happy to share my experience. I mean, for 5 years, I worked to try to help the cities with ordinances and things, and a lot of what they did, I have seen it work. And again, I think a lot of the owners, there are a few bad apples, but a lot of the owners, they have families. Families are who my customers were in California. My guess is families are renting these houses here. That's my guess. I don't know for sure. And I don't know how many corporate people you have buying houses here, but I think you've helped that. And that's what Palm Springs did. One house for one family. And that got rid of so many companies coming in and buying 5, 10 houses and making it a business. So anyway, I'd love to share my experience if you want it. And if not, I think there are ways to not ban it and to try really strict options. And homeowners will pay attention. And my recommendation to the homeowners is they pass those fines on to the guests, and the guests comply. I had 5,000 families stay in my houses, and I only had 2 citations in 15 years, and that was during the Coachella Music Festival. So, and we handled it right away. But I got 2 citations, and I was going for nothing. That just happened. So anyway, thank you for your time and all your effort in looking at this.
Yes.
Okay, I'll get up.
My name is Cindy Pilling. I live in Whispering Pines. I want to thank you for your effort on the job that you've been doing. Lots of pieces to this puzzle. And I've been listening to some of the comments, and some of them I fully agree with. Some of them I disagree with. I happen to live next to an individual who is an investor, primarily wanting to rent her property 52 weeks out of the year. I have had people urinating in my driveway. I have had beer cans thrown, rocks thrown, people climbing on my mound, a couple of kids that were so cute. And I really feel that some of your comments relative to enforcing the regulations are right on. I really believe that's important. I agree with Mike in terms of limiting the number of nights. Perhaps that would solve some of the problems. You brought up some interesting comments as well. But I also wonder how many of you live next door to a short-term rental and are experiencing any of the problems that I'm experiencing, and whether or not in your homes, at your permanent residence, you are experiencing what I'm experiencing. I know it's difficult to assume someone else's position, but I'd like to take a moment to ask you to do that. I've lived here 20 years. My husband was on board of trustee. He tried to put some limitations initially on short-term rentals so that we wouldn't be in the position that we are in right now. But here we are, and we're going to have to deal with it. One of the things I want to bring up, I wasn't going to talk about this today, but since I felt that it was necessary to present my point of view, I did that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was that I got a notice from our water board, and they are asking us to limit our usage of water. Timber Creek Estates, when the developer put the development in, he purchased some rights to some of the wells, and that's how we get our water supply. And this is the first time I've ever gotten a notice saying that we need to restrict our water. There are reservoirs in our country right now who are in situations that are desperate because the Colorado River is not supplying water. If any of you have taken the opportunity to drive by the Dillon Reservoir, you will see that we have an issue here in Colorado. So I'm doing my best to create a situation where I'm not using a lot of water. I'm a single person in a home. The other point is the folks next to me have 10, 12, I don't know how many people living there, renting the property. 10 guys in a property next to me are using, I would assume, a lot more water than I'm using. So one of the issues that I'd like to present today is what are the environmental impacts of short-term rentals, rather than just looking at some of the other issues that have been presented. So that's pretty much what I'd like to leave you with today. I think we really do need to throw our weight at some of the environmental issues at this point, because our water department, although it's been very reliable, it's fragile. And you probably know that because the water station is right there. And what I'd like to see is that we take an opportunity to discuss some of the environmental issues that are being impacted by multiple people living in homes. I don't know how many weeks a year. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Chris Bellingham, 6871 Highway 9. I want to thank each of you who took time to read the letter that I sent you last week. Tonight, I actually want to echo what a lot has been said, that I hope this conversation will actually focus on enforcement, as I've been suggesting, rather than more regulations. Some of the regulations left to be discussed that have been suggested aren't adopted by anybody else in all of Summit County. Nobody else has found that to be a helpful path, so I hope that would carry some weight. But I especially want to ask that you do not adopt an additional occupancy cap on top of what is already in place. As I mentioned in my letter, Blue River already uses the strictest occupancy formula for short-term rentals in all of Summit County. Yes, it is true. I've looked at it, including all residential zones in all the rest of Summit County. It's more strict than Frisco's. Look it up. Please do not adapt additional occupancy cap on top of what is already the strictest formula in the region. I come from a large family. I'm one of 6 kids, which means I grew up in a house of 8 people. I now have 4 kids of my own, and my siblings all have houses, and finding a place where we can all get together is really difficult. That's exactly why I bought 6871 Highway 9, even with all the quirks and many problems and all of the work that property needed. The house was already laid out perfectly for large families up to 20 people. It just needed a lot of work to it. So I fell out of contract multiple times. What I have done to that property has been a significant investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars to make the house safe and to make it legal and to make the house more environmentally healthy for the community by protecting our water supply and protecting our wetlands by making the investment to take it off the septic system and put it onto our sewer system. All of that was with a single goal, to have a house that can eventually be used by my large family. But first, I need help having it paid for by other large families and large groups like ours. So I'm asking, please do not adopt an occupancy cap that would exclude families like mine. The uncomfortable truth is that would force me to sell the property at a significant loss, so please don't force me out. I recognize that allowing a 9-bedroom house with a 20-person occupancy sounds like a lot, especially for those of you who have not grown up in large families. But it's important to keep in mind that for a short-term rental, an occupancy just regulates a peak that happens on occasion, not the total use of the house and the community sources. I have actual data from real large houses just like this one that operate all year long as a short-term rental. And that data says that my house on average would only have an occupancy of 7 to 8 people. That's 7 to 8 people's worth of water and electricity and other community resources being used over the course of the year. That's a very reasonable number for a house of that size. In fact, it's the same number of people I grew up living with every day of the year, which is to say, please don't put an additional occupancy cap on short-term rentals because you think my house is going to use more than its fair share. It's not accurate according to the data. Of course, I do recognize that some people may not want to live next to large groups that would be visiting next door to them. Honestly, it's another reason I chose the property I did. I don't have neighbors on 3 sides of me. But even outside my house, we in Blue River, we already have a noise ordinance so that groups of any size won't bother their neighbors. We already have a cap on the number of vehicles so that groups of any size can't clog up the streets. So please enforce the rules we have in place rather than piling on new ones. Additional occupancy caps simply target and push out large families like mine. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Scott Babcock. I'm at 295 Representative Drive. I've been here before. We've owned our property, our home here for 10 years. I've had a short-term rental license for 8 years. I only rent 6 to 8 times per year. That's about 30 to 35 minutes per year. I'm here to make a request to be added to the exception. I think the board is listening to a lot of people that are up here. There's some scenarios where people bought homes right when the moratorium was being put into place, and there might be some exceptions being put in. I'm asking to be added to that exception. And the reason is for the following. It's very simply based on good faith efforts. And this is the reason why. In December of last year, we filed for the renewal. I'm not asking for a new license, I'm asking for the renewal. We filed the application. We paid the $1,432. Those funds were collected by the town. The information was uploaded into the portal. And I know there's even a couple of board members who have said that portal can be a little tricky. I didn't upload those documents, my wife did. but she thought everything went well. She then followed up with an email to the town in January asking if the information had been received. That was us proactively asking. We had paid the fees. We thought the upload worked correctly. We followed up in January to say, did it work correctly? The response from the town is, hey, we're really, really busy right now. Can we get back to you? No problem. We waited. An email was sent to my wife, I believe it was in the March timeframe, that said information was missing. All the information in the report was not there. That email was missed by my wife. It went to a junk folder. That's not the town's problem. That's our problem. That's our fault. I own that. We own that. But we then did reach back out because when you put in, because we follow every single rule and regulation that the town has ever had for 8 years on what you're supposed to do with short-term licenses. And I was saying, we've got to put that STR license up on the portal because that's one of the rules, right? So we proactively reached out to say, hey, can we have our license number? And that's when we learned about the moratorium. The $1,432 was not refunded until July. So the town held those funds for 6 months. So I'm in a situation where I rent very little. I rent just to cover costs. Just my little personal story. This year alone, Excel Energy, in replacing all the phone poles, did not splice the line to my home correctly. Over a 1 year period of time, that line deteriorated, eroded, and sent 160 volts into my house in February of this year. It caused $46,000 worth of damage. Did Excel pay for that? No. You know why? Because it's protected by the state of Colorado. My insurance company canceled me 1 month ago. To get a proper insurance company, guess what they want? A class 4 roof. You know what a class 4 roof costs? $25,000. I'm putting a roof on right now. So these costs that I'm incurring are help offset. I mean, even the stuff that I rent is only to help offset the costs of the improvements that I'm putting into the house. Proactively and reactively, because I didn't ask for Excel to do what they did. And the roof was probably going to be needed in 2 or 3 years, so that's fine. I'll do it now. That's a lot of dollars, and I'm just going to reiterate and summarize. I'm asking to be added to the exception because we had bidirectional best efforts going on between the town and us. We missed one email, and as a result, I didn't get my renewal. So that's all I'm asking for. I'm a really good operator. I have 3 layers of screening. I have somebody that can be on site within 5 minutes, never had any incidents. So that's my own little personal story. In the 40 seconds that I have remaining, the thing that I want to give back is I started getting educated. I've been coming to the meetings, maybe you recognize me. And I started researching. I'm thinking, the town of Blue River, there's other towns that have gone before us on this topic. So I started researching it. And the one thing that I found is it's not the number of STRs that you issue, it's the intensity of STRs. You hear stories like Cindy over here talk about these companies that rent at 365 nights a year. If you have an STR, if you have a Blue River STR, you can rent your property for 365 nights. It's an intensity issue. You can offer different programs. And so I did a little information here, and I'm going to give this to Chad as I walk this way. Other towns like Telluride, Aspen, Avon, Vail, Breckenridge have all done this prior. You can have a flexible STR program without administrative nightmare, because I heard the last meeting and that was one of the concerns. So I'm going to give you this because these just have some ideas that you can kind of explore if you choose to go that path. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? I'll go ahead and close public comment. And we will get to our first item. This is brief description of policy 2 and 3 under Ken.
All right. Well, so as we have had a number of conversations about policy that have gone on over the past month and a half, give or take. And significant progress has been made, and there are a number of motions that have been made particularly related to zones and caps, as well as suggestions towards how we process, for example, grandfathering and other items of that nature. The intent of this, I'll actually I'll say going into number two, the intended scope of the policy discussion is to predominantly focus on resolving the majority of other outstanding policy questions that exist before the board, to basically to sew up what we need to handle in order to craft a proper ordinance for your consideration. This discussion item that is shown on page 2 indicates the majority of the items that Bob and I believe need to be hammered out one way or the other to have forward momentum on progress. And that's more or less where we sit at the current moment. And I would like to point everyone to the data that is included pages 4 through 12 of the agenda packet, as well as I sent out an Excel document that is admittedly a much better searchable format. PDF loses a lot of information and it's a lot harder to search. But what this information provides is a synopsis of what could be considered comparable high impact tourism mountain towns in the state of Colorado, which is broken out by items which include the type of short-term rentals, licenses that are provided, the cap, minimum number of rental days, maximum number of rental days, minimum length of stay, grandfathering, the renewal window that is utilized for the licensure program, the penalties for operating without a license, the revocation standards and penalties that are utilized in order to facilitate that process on the administrative side of things, how violations are handled, addressed, and pursued, and the monetary penalties associated with it if the information was available, the maximum occupancy of an STR license that is provided within each of these communities, as well as if the town has reached a cap, how do they utilize an allocation system to determine the provision of licensure if they reach back underneath the cap, as well as the fee structure that is utilized during their licensure program. This is a mouthful of data and a lot to review, and it's not. I don't expect this to be something that one of these is the golden child to review, but these are the different practices that are used, and it runs the gamut. So STRs are not something we can handle as a one-size-fits-all situation, and Blue River has to acknowledge their position within the wider community. And that's more or less what I wanted to cover. Bob, is there anything that you'd like to mention just before we kick off?
Well, one of the reasons we had the sports section to get to enforcement was an effort to get the board to focus and come up with some really great ideas and actually come up with some fairly good consensus on where you want to go. But in order for us to start drafting the new ordinance, we would need to have some refinement of your positions, perhaps some official statements with regard to things like, do you want to impose a cap? What is the number? Is it going to apply to all zones? Do you want to use the zone system to get some finality regarding those issues? We've heard strong support for some of those, but we've never really heard, I move that we direct staff to draft an ordinance that would do the following. So those kinds of direction would be extremely helpful. As to issues that are secondary to these regulations, which include regulations like, do we want to impose an annual cap of per night visitation? We've heard you talk about that, about the fact that maybe we don't want to have 365 use of short-term rentals throughout the community, that some number would be appropriate that's less than that. What number is that? Should we draft in an ordinance? Again, ordinances are to be discussed, deliberated, subject to comment by the public, but we need to understand what you want us to put on paper so we can bring it back to you. Because we're going to spend every single night on these workshops giving you ideas like, what do you want to do? So we get some solid issues refined for you to tell us what to put in an ordinance. So zones, caps, whether or not you want to limit the number of annual stays, whether you want to limit the duration of a rental, in other words, 3 nights, 4 nights, 5 nights, no limitation whatsoever. Those things need to be made solid so we can draft a regulation for you to consider. Grandfathering is a second level issue on whether or not you want to allow for individuals who already have licenses, if we already exceed the cap, to keep their licenses. We've already talked a little bit about that, about the wisdom of allowing those things to continue, those grandfathers to happen. But we've not talked at all about what to do with regard to individuals who thought they might be able to get a license, but were precluded by the moratorium. We've not had any in-depth discussion about that. We've had some tinkling along the edges about what do we want to do with those people who may feel like they were wronged by the fact that the moratorium came up, getting ready to apply. What do we want to do about those? It's a second level issue. But we really need to get kind of more focused on the issues that are going to come into the ordinance. After that, we probably should talk a little bit about enforcement and the kinds of enforcement mechanisms that we can employ to basically set the table for the next session, in which we're going to talk more seriously about what do you want to do with regard to how tough to be, if you will, about enforcement. There's a lot of issues on enforcement that need to be handled as a group and not just kind of picked on the surface, on the edges. So that's really what I want to see from you all tonight, is to give us some direction on what do you want us to bring back to you in kind of a more concrete words on paper form for you to debate.
Okay. So going into it, the first one is confirm approval of zone concept. I believe not this meeting, but or not the last meeting, but the one before. We had made a motion to approve the 6. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, correct. 6. Keep going.
The 6 zones, the first concept. And I believe we made a motion to approve that. I remember. So,
Before we, we wanted to come to consensus, but as far as making a motion and agreeing, majority agreeing to it, is that policy now, or is it just
it's
to try to get consensus?
Telling staff to spend the time to type on pieces of paper that this is to script out that zone plan for you. It's not been done yet, but we'd like to spend time. But I don't want to spend our time over hours developing something that comes back to you and say, I don't want this. But tell us you want to do zones, you want to do 6, we'll draft it up.
Since 6 seems to be a consensus, as opposed to what we voted on and approved. I don't want to give the impression of something.
No, do not approve anything till the ordinance hits your desk and you vote. All right. I need to know, we need to know, what do we draft?
Got it.
So I would say, right, since
Consensus, you're right.
the consensus was
6 zones.
6 zones, first concept. Confirm of approval of caps for all zones. We had a consensus of 15%.
Well, we didn't have a consensus, but we had a majority.
Majority.
And I wasn't here, and I disagree with all of the cap percentages that were discussed and approved at that meeting.
Sure. So as far as these things, can we come back to them after you throw in our thoughts on it, or are we to agree or disagree now and discuss it?
Yeah, we can.
I just want to make sure I'm following.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I advocated for 25%.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I did that is because the data that Chad collected seemed to indicate that we were around 25% now. And my goal was to take what we have now and allow that to continue forward and let enforcement let enforcement have a chance to work. As opposed to saying, okay, now we're going to go to 15%. Which means virtually no, as far as I can tell, no short-term rental licenses in the future. That's what we adopt doing. So I just want to put on the record, I advocated for 25%. I will along, big part of the group wanted 10%. And I said, can we compromise? And 15% was the compromise. So I was outvoted, and I want to come up with a plan that works. And there's a point where you reach and you're beating a dead horse, but I'm putting it out there that I advocated
25%, I thought that was reasonable. Thanks.
I don't think that we should go less than what we have for sure. And I think that enforcement has not even been given a chance whatsoever. And if we get rid of 10 houses, that's what really needs to happen. And so I would even stick at 30 or 35 or 40%. I don't want to limit the potential. And I think more competition makes it better, and it will make people that have bad houses or bad hosts get weeded out naturally through the economy and what's going on in the market anyway that I've been seeing. I think other people are seeing it's just way more competitive, and the bad rentals will go away on their own if we do that. Limiting what we have already and being that it was an unnecessary emergency, I think is a discredit to the citizens and to our town.
I think part of the reason we came to 15% was because we were talking 100% 365 rentals for 15%. So we said 15% is a place, right? With the option to go back in and say, this percentage could be a lot different, right? We're trying to manage impact, right? So if 15% of our homes are 365-degree rentals, what does that impact look like? Is that impact the same as 50% with a limit on number of nights rented? And we set those, so I agree with you, Mark, but we set those parameters with that in mind, right? Like, what's that overall impact? Is it, if we double that, let's say we went to 30, like Johnny said, we went to that 30% and we lowered that down to where you only had 6 months worth of rentals, or, you know what I mean? I'm more than flexible to go through those gymnastics to try to figure out what that impact is. I said from the beginning, when we first started this program, everything we've done, I've never been a fan of limiting licenses, right? If you either have the right to rent your house or you don't have the right to rent your house. And I think we can make arguments for both, right? What we veered into is this trying to manage this impact. So what do we do to manage this impact, right? Do we have 100% short-term rental opportunities that only work for 15% of the year? To me, that's more my lines of thinking, right? Everybody still has that right, but now we're managing the impact. We came up with 15%, but it was really a placeholder. And I think Bob even said it at the time. We just needed to have a place to start the exact discussion we're having.
And I thought 25% was a good place. And I think, like I really appreciate the people coming, whether they're for or against short-term rentals. It helps me make decisions to share your ideas. And the lady that's from, I didn't remember her name, but from the Arizona, Palm Springs area. I think that's, we're reinventing the wheel to some extent, and I hate doing that. I love taking other examples and seeing what's working. So I thought, again, we're not talking about enforcement. I've been really, really anxious to talk about enforcement, but we keep kicking that can to the next meeting, because I believe that strong enforcement, aggressive enforcement is going to make the difference. And we took our first aggressive move as a board when we said, only one license. You can have as many homes as you want up here, but you only get one license. That was aggressive, and I know a lot of us were nervous about it. And I was glad we did. But I think the majority of people, I've said this many times, are good actors. They're trying to play by the rules. And the majority of the 25, let's just say 25% of rentals that are out there now, I think are good actors. And I agree with everybody agrees that the bad actors, the minority, are what are causing a lot of the conversation to get to the level that it has. And so I do want to help the people who are good actors. They're not doing it I know we get into semantics about what's a business, what's not a business. They're just trying to offset the cost. And I don't want to be one of those people. So, sorry, but I had to respond. You know me.
I think that Ben said everybody should have the opportunity, can't limit it. That's exactly what's wrong with the entire government right now, and why I would say there's such disapproval on a whole national level, and with all the undermining things there. And this being done, in my opinion, wrong the first time. I mean, without letting enforcement come in, and I'm very pro strict enforcement and raising to steep fines and doing that. But then on the license and application side of things, I'm the exact opposite and think that the administrative side and things that forgiveness should be giving 10 times to the person if they're actually trying and there's a technological issue or this issue and that our fees are so expensive, 400% more, that we're not haven't done anything yet to even justify that. And when we said we were going to, and to get to here, it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse.
I think in the past there was hardly any compliance, so we need to see what compliance can look like in the first place to stop the issues that are happening. We do have limited resources and infrastructure and staff. It would be, I can't imagine having everybody who wants a license and having it 365, what that could do to staff and all the resources. Emergency, the chief said at the last meeting, I hadn't thought of before. I forbid something happens, there's a fire or something, there's no way to get a hold of everybody. Those things are super scary to me, not having enough water and having to truck in water just to have a normal living life. Because we're all on well, that's incredibly nerve-wracking to be concerned about. And I would say that's a real concern, in my opinion. And a lot of people who worry about drugs. So I believe in a cap because we just need to see if we can make compliance work. We can have a cap and change it for future boards, but the compliance piece to me is what needs to happen. So not continuing with more licenses doesn't make sense to me when we can't handle the ones we have.
Since you brought up other resources, I don't disagree, Jody, especially water. You and I live in one of the most highly affected, how do I say this, impacted subdivisions by short-term rentals. I have a 90-foot house, and we're in a drought. So I firsthand know what's going on with water consumption to some extent. And you are in the same neighborhood, but we are having the extremes put on us right now, and nobody's well is going to dry. So I understand and don't disagree that we need to be careful with our water resources, but I don't necessarily think 15% is going to do it. I'm not sure that where we're at right now, if we could to maintain that, would really significantly hurt our water resources going forward in the future. It's not the first time we've been in a drought either, but I just want to make that point.
I mean, is there really a house that rents 365 days a year? Because I find that really hard.
80.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I lower my price and I try to run my house as much as I can. And I'm next door. And it's still, I mean, I didn't have a rental for 7 weeks in April and May, even trying to do that. So like, I wasn't even here for 4 of the weeks. So there was no resources being used at my house. So without factual data, that's where I struggle. Like, I'm a factual numbers person because this data can be provided and we can find it and or hire someone to do it. So without any of that, it just leaves me feeling more terrible about all of this. You know, I mean, I just think that for me, it's just enforcement and going from there, because we did all these rules last year and nothing has been done. We were in a transition with Chad and, you know, we didn't have time and energy or resources to do it, but now we do. So that's time.
I guess if I could chime in here, I guess for me, observing from the outside, the issue being one of, we have not been able to enforce what we currently have. That's, I think, uniformly understood. We need more resources, time, effort, money, staff in order to enforce what we currently have. The question is, should we continue to issue more licenses when we're not currently able to manage what we currently have without an understanding of how much time, effort, money, and staff are we going to need if we continue to issue more and more licenses? There is an understanding that if we throw enough money, time, and staff at it, we can manage 50%, 60%, 70% licensing within the town. But we're not there yet. We haven't reached that ability to understand that we can afford time, effort, staff. managing more licenses. So the question I would pose to you is it wise, and you're the deciders, to issue more licenses when we don't really know how much time, effort, staff, and money we need to manage what we might have? There's a spot in there that I'm just uncomfortable with. That's my observation from that side.
That's how I feel.
No, just to answer your question, Bob, I'm not advocating that we issue more licenses. I'm advocating that we status quo.
Thank
you. And if our data is correct, we're about somewhere around 27% as a whole. I'm saying let's maintain that. Let's don't go above that. But let's give enforcement an opportunity. We're going to hire, and we just always want to kick this. We're going to get on enforcement. In order to do it properly, we have to have a code enforcement officer. We're going to do that, most likely. I think there needs to be better coordination between the code enforcement and the police department, because I think the police department gets a lot of the complaints, especially noise and traffic. It never makes it to the town. So we really can't properly identify the bad actors. I think if we had that information, there'd be a lot more people, and we had strict fines. There'd be a lot more people not violating the rules like this person over here said. And I also think it's important for people to understand, back in 2024, the town and trustees went through the same process, did all the studies and everything. Licenses have actually gone down. So that's good news for us. I think we just need to manage what we have and get better enforcement.
If we have, what was the revenue brought in by the licenses this year? If there's 208, and what's the average license? $1,200. It's $250,000
fees.
$250,000 should be a very adequate number of being able to do what we did here.
We spent $200,000 on software.
But that's one line. And then it's
every year. It's annual price.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, the chief had upper 60% of his time going to that one.
And what was the 3.4% tax?
I think our total revenue, Jeff doesn't have his numbers in front of him. I think we were in that mid 300s.
So the tax isn't meant to pay for
taxes.
Short-term, right? The
taxes, yeah.
It's not to pay for a program of short-term rentals. So the tax is kind of out of the equation. The only thing that pays for staff and additional the software and additional staff would be the licenses.
Can you clarify that one for a minute? Because I've always kind of been confused on that. I get the short-term license fees are there to offset the costs of the program. The lodging tax, I've been said, is not specific to covering the costs of short-term rental program, but it can be used for that, right?
It can be used for potholes. It can be used
for any
staff, anything,
including
taxes,
including short-term rental program. So let's make sure that we understand that.
As can property taxes be used to manage the short-term rental program.
Okay, understood. I just want to make sure that it's not just the short-term rental license fees that cover the costs of this program. $200,000 a year, a lot of money for a software program. So that's what we have to do.
I'll make a distinction. It's a 90.
Oh, 90.
It's 90, but the residual amount of staff time and expenditure will exceed the amount that we pull in of registration.
So 90,000.
The amount of time each staff member
still a lot of
takes.
money.
Yes, correct.
And once you throw in a code enforcement ambassador,
Yeah.
it's not that code enforcement is not just for short-term rentals.
Correct.
We need a code enforcement officer for a lot of our other ordinances that we haven't been enforcing too. So just want to kind of make sure I'm clear on when we talk about lodging tax and short-term licensing fees, what that money could be used for.
I'll kick it to Heather and Ted and see if you guys have anything that you'd like to chime in on this matter.
Yeah, I don't want to see them higher than we're currently at, like I have stated several times, because we do need to get a grasp on the program and see where we can work forward from this. And it's knowing where we're at. I don't feel like all of our property taxes should be going to support a small percentage of short-term rental properties. So, you know, I wasn't here through all this prior board effort at redoing all this stuff. And I've tried my best in the last couple of months to read over the stuff and look at it. It is a lot to dive into. It really is. And to see how it's impacting everything. We don't have endless resources as a town. It's not just keep hiring another staff person. That's not going to be an option. We don't have money just flowing in to do that. And there's so many branches that come from this of enforcement or other aspects of it. So what I do see is we do need to stop where we're at so we can move forward with the next piece, which we were talking about policy first and then enforcement after. So everyone keeps saying, why are we not doing enforcement? Well, we have to know what we're trying to enforce first. So that's why a lot of conversation has been around developing that policy first and then moving on at the end of these conversations towards the enforcement part. And that is definitely things I see in here, like you mentioned about fines and such. They don't seem to have a strong enough bite to really encourage a different point of view on things. So being at this point and putting these caps in place right now and moving forward just allows us to make sure that we have enforcement in place, policy in place for that, and that it is working. And then once we realize what we can manage, the resources we have, we can then adjust and go forward. Does that mean coming back to it next June after we've had a winter season? It doesn't end our discussions. It's just a jumping off point to move forward. So.
And to go to Bari's comments, like I take complete part in the fact that 25% cap is no different today than a 15% or a 10%. Here's why. Is because you're not going to tell people who have current licenses that they don't get a license for next year if they're, we got to get to 15%, therefore you're out. We're going to grandfather those individual licenses who are already operational and who want to renew it for next year. We're going to do that. So 25% versus 10% versus 15 doesn't matter. We've got to bring our enforcement up to a level to handle what we currently have out, which is about 25% licenses, right? In most areas. And so the issue is, cap issue to me is kind of not really the issue. We can say 10, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be 25. And yes, we'll get some attrition with people not licensing for us for the next year or who get revoked. Those numbers will come down, but not to 15% overnight, right? It's not going to happen. So the cap issue is kind of not a fallacy, but it's a wish list of what we want to be. It's not true. Okay. So whatever you set that number at, the ability to enforce licenses and fines are two different disconnected issues also. We have to catch the people first. Okay, that's the staff effort, that's the money issue before we assess the fines. Okay, just magically saying fines are going to be really serious doesn't matter if we don't catch people who are in non-compliance. So catching people is the first thing. Fines are the second part of making sure we get the penalty associated with the catching people. So catching people is money, staff time, resources, software. So that's kind of how it all fits together. I don't want us to get hooked up on 10, 15% as driving the boat. What really matters is whether we can enforce what we have in place, which we're going to talk about enforcement levels next. But we need to know, you want to set a cap? Said yes, we want to set a cap. Give us a number, put it in there, you'll vote on that, understanding that that number is kind of a wish list number. We're going to stay at 25% until we get attrition, right?
Well, I want 25%, but
it's
the
good.
unanimous.
We already said, Barry, there's no
Nobody's-
licenses are being revoked.
Nobody's-
So what we
nobody's
have
stuck
now
on-
is
So why not
a
just
number.
25%?
Well, it's just like I said, we had a goal down the road, right? If that's where we thought the town should be. And part of it was on that piece of the software we're doing, the enforcement, all these things that we're doing, are these gonna make the program so much better? And we're like, yeah, let's up this. Let's up this percentage. Let's do whatever we want. Because right now, Barry, I don't think we bring in enough money to justify what we spend on.
but you can use lodging tax to offset some of those costs. You don't have to stick just with license fee.
You can use property tax.
Yeah. So we do
All
have
our tax.
Yes.
I just don't know the
And
juices worth the squeeze in the end, and I think we've tried to discuss that. And I think we're trying to set some parameters to see if it really is in the end, right? So if you want to set the 25% bar, it doesn't matter. I've already said it. We have what we
then
have.
let's do.
We have what we have. If you already said we're at 27, we're still.
It matters only a little bit. If you say 25%, if you say 10%, we're not going to issue new licenses when we have attrition. If you say 25%, we may issue new licenses to get back up to 25% because the attrition will allow us to issue more licenses. But 10, 15, we're not going to have new licenses. So that 25% number does matter. It does matter with regards to new licenses.
I guess I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. It doesn't matter, but it does matter.
By operation, if nobody sells their home, nobody gives up their license, we're going to stay at 25% long term. But there will be a couple people who sell their home and lose the license, and it can't be issued if we're down under 25%. 25%, and somebody sells their home, that license is available for a new person on the list. Okay? So we're going to 25 is going to be, if we set 25, we're going to maintain 25, we're going to issue new licenses for them. If we say 10, 15%, we're not going to issue.
With the caveat that with the zone model, existing zones sit above the 25% threshold regardless of conversations being had. So it's not a statement that if it's a 1-for-1, that if we're at 25% exactly right now and someone sells, there's an inherent, depending on the zone, that ability to hold, to retain a new license.
Well, I guess we'll just agree to disagree on whether it's 25 or 15, that it doesn't really matter. I think status quo would be close to 25%. And there's other communities that are doing 25%. 10 and 15% is pretty extreme, in my opinion. So I went along with it, and I'll vote no on it tonight for 10 or 15% or 15, and yes on 25. But I just think it's important to make the distinction. And I know that somebody said, Heather, we don't, enforcement's coming later. It's very difficult to have a lot of these conversations without talking about enforcement as part of it. And I've been tried to bite my tongue. Mm-hmm. And we hear it come up a lot. And I think that enforcement, and Bob just brought it up again, it's going to be the key, I think, to whether people, because we got a lot of good actors, good people in this community that are playing by the rules. It's the bad ones that we want to get rid of. And I agree. We're at a tipping point. We don't need to add more short-term rentals, but I don't think 25% is going to really add that many more. 25%, because we're almost there now in most zones, and in some we've exceeded it, like Timber Creek Estates, way it's. So, anyway.
Ken?
Well, nobody left me anything. I think that what we're trying to do here, and what the public, and I think the board understands, what the public needs to understand is that we are trying to craft a policy, and then that policy can subsequently be enforced. Enforcement is a huge piece. We're all aware of it. It hasn't been discussed because we're trying to nail down the nuts and the bolts of the policy itself, so that then we have something that's sort of ironclad and not weak, that we can then pass to the enforcement people. And the enforcement piece is going to be huge, and it remains to be discussed, but it will be. And I still believe that short-term rentals are businesses. I absolutely believe that, Tom. I don't want to engage in an argument, but I was about to. I think that the cap number that we came up with, I viewed it as a placeholder. There's, I think it's Mr. Chris that comes in here and says there are 270 operating short-term rentals that are unlicensed in the town of Blue River. Now, I don't know if that number is accurate or true. Regardless, I don't know if that number is accurate or true.
That was a number from the software company, but not,
But that's what this is supposed to help us solve, right? None of those people are going to get a license because they've already been, operating in flagrant violation of any policy that has been in effect, which hasn't worked well, which is why we are where we are. So, the cap, I sort of see it as like Bob said, it was a placeholder because if you look at all the dots there and in the zones, I mean, we're not going to get to 15%, even if we tried until well down the road. Like, yeah, 10 years from now, if we ever get there. All we're trying to do is make this thing work, run, and sort of pay for itself, which it isn't doing currently. So those are some of the goals and some of the struggles that we've been having that some of you have been a part of or here to witness all along, and some of you are just showing up for, which is fine. You're all welcome. And I look forward to getting into it some more. So that's all I have. I agree with some of the things that you said, some of the things you said. I'm not against you, John. I'm not against Jabari. You keep skipping over 20% though.
Which one did you get today?
But again, I don't view that number as anything that is really relative or even it's meaningful in a sense, but it really doesn't matter. So that's all that I have to throw in there at this juncture until we start talking about something else.
I was looking at kind of the cap as to keep neighborhoods that have high concentrations levels to stay from getting higher concentration levels. So the cap was kind of to protect neighborhoods that have way too many, in my opinion. And then the other part was that we would have time to see if compliance and all of this code and everything can make sense. So if it's 15% or like you said, 20 or whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. I would like to see no new licenses until we can figure this out. Minus the few ones that we've discussed and the ones where, we talked about if somebody, we haven't gotten to that yet, but if there was any licenses for people who good faith, like you said. So I think all that's part of it, but the cap for me was to be, so that we can work on the nuts and bolts before moving forward further and to protect neighborhoods, zones.
So I can clarify that, you just don't want to see any short-term licenses issued. And that's your reason for 15%, because that's what will happen.
Yeah.
Until
you can raise
this whole
the number, again, the number doesn't really matter. To me, I think I also say no new licenses. No new licenses. And then we can figure that out going forward. It's gonna work or it's not. But at this point, I would say no new licenses. 50% is the number.
Well, don't call it a placeholder, and then we'll review things, and if it's going well, down the road, we'll raise it maybe. Well,
I don't wanna have it open and then going down the road, it didn't work, and we're at
It's not gonna
50%.
happen.
But that may be true.
Hey, Bob, I wouldn't even be a trustee at that point. When you go, it'd be, when we put in 15%, we gotta get down to 15%. I will be, my kids might be wiping drool off my face at that point.
I completely agree with you on everything you always say, but it is a placeholder in the sense that if you have the resources and the money and the staff to manage 25%, fine, great. It's a placeholder to bring it back up when we get the staff in place, right?
But
we can't do
you're
it
assuming that people are gonna wanna go along and up it in the future, and I don't agree. I think people are they're just gonna say, okay, it's 15%, we're not gonna agree it's great.
We got people in the room who want licenses and can't get them, so.
But those people we're talking about, most of the people that are here, most of them, got caught up in the moratorium, and they can't get their license right now, or they're worried that they're not gonna get, and I think we all agree that those people shouldn't be penalized. They're gonna get their license most likely. But the new people who are for sale now or something like that, for worth the threshold, you take Timber Creek Estates, for example, there's not gonna be short-term licenses at even 25% for a long time up there, over there. And if it really doesn't matter, then stick it at 25%.
But I'll ask you, I think the debate is good. I'm not trying to be hostile, but are you saying that there's no interest in new licenses, but for the people who recently came to the city or to the town and want? There's not gonna be new demand. There's no new demand coming.
I really can't tell you that, Bob, because technically, or if you look at the stats, licensing has gone down. And I think attrition, and I think just the hassle of getting a short-term license, paying for a short-term license, it's not gonna get easier, it's not gonna get less expensive. I think a lot of people will just not even do it at all. I think the number of short-term licenses, if we kept everything the way it is right now and enforced stuff, I think they would continue to go down.
Part of my concern from an administrative perspective is as we've increased the responsibility and requirements, there is an argument to be made that there isn't a lower number of operating short-term rentals in town. It's an issue of not reaching the administrative requirements of receiving a license. We don't have information necessarily to say that we had 18 people sell their homes last year. Those 18 had licenses, and that's the reason that we have 18 less licenses than 2025. I mean, there's other reasons people may not want to hold a license anymore as well. So there's more extenuating circumstances, but the concern I have is the lower licensure may not reflect a lower number of operations. And that will, the long-term intent is to have additional personnel to handle that investigative perception and effort, as well as having the software as that missing kind of third component between the public input that's received, the town's review, and then the software's review. So we will have a reasonable amount of data to make actionable decisions is the intending point in 2027. But right now, I tend to, with understanding of with the administrative work we've done, that operations have not decreased.
What? Statistically, they have.
Statistically, they have, but there's an increased preponderance of unlicensed rentals.
And you guys, how did you quantify this? What data is? I mean,
an internet search.
An internet search, subjective internet search. I just don't. That's really not very scientific to say. I did a scientific, or I did an internet search and found that there was non-compliance. They had a fire pit when they weren't supposed to have a fire pit.
Well, this is unlicensed. These people that didn't want to opt their license.
And I'd like to see that data, but.
And in an ideal world, I'd have that data out and ready and just ready for display for you. But
in an effort to try to find software, a little compromise, maybe a little bit more. What's the lowest in our zone? 6 zones, Chad, excluding the condos over here. What zone has the least? What is the least percentage in any of those zones right now?
16.
16.
You said
Wow.
Oh, could be condos. Pardon me, 20. Yes.
Okay. So maybe the board would consider, or the trustees would consider 20. Maybe.
And I want to emphasize as part of this conversation, we can have these individual discussions where I would recommend having a statement of this is the cap that I desire, this is the minimum, this is the maximum number of nights I desire, and if these are two combined, this is how I view 1 and 2 interacting. Because they do exist in tandem, and we need to reach a point where those two have some sort of harmony here. One doesn't exist without the other if we decide to do both. It's exceedingly rare to use the maximum number of nights without a cap, I'll say that much. And it is exceedingly rare to have an excess of 25% cap in a town. With basically people, it's either you don't regulate that or it's usually well and under that 25% threshold. So it's kind of a one or the other is the common operation. However, each individual municipality is unique in their needs and desires, and that does not indicate what the town has to do.
Okay, so you lost me on a lot of that, but are you saying that if your number of nights, length of rental stay, is it needs to be in harmony with your percentage of zones, or the percentage of the cap in the zone?
I'm saying that the typical way it's handled is you either do caps by itself, you do caps and minimums. You don't really do minimums without caps. So this is a bit outside the bounds of the conversation, but I just wanted to couch what the general activity by other comparable communities is. Because we need to have a discussion to reach a general consensus about these two particular items. We don't need to use both. We don't need to use either if that's the decision of the board. But the decision does have to be reached so we can craft one way or the other.
So, but going to the question of rental minimum number of nights, and you talk about other communities.
Yes.
Is any of the are any of those communities? Can you give us something relative to what we might mention as Breckenridge, Frisco, Dillon, Silverthorne? Do they have a limit on the number of nights?
They do not utilize that model.
Well, then,
because they utilize CAP or they utilize other systems, and once again, this is a sticky situation to put itself in, but no two communities are alike. Each one has their own individual needs, and
I couldn't emphasize that enough. To say, let's be like Breckenridge, and Breckenridge has a massive amount of money and a massive amount of commercial and a massive amount of tourism. To say, oh, we should match that because they do 20 or they do 10 or they do 5. We should match that because that's what they're doing.
I'm not suggesting.
I think we really need to stay away from the idea that we are unlike any municipality in Summit County except for perhaps Montezuma. That's it. And so to say we need to mimic these other communities with regard to what they're doing on short-term rentals is to lose track of the fact that they are not at all like us. And even you would agree because you are in these communities. Your business is in this community. We are not like them. We have Blue River with no commercial whatsoever. Does not compare to anybody else with regard to STRs. Sorry, that's just my sitting on the sidelines observation. Do not as some kind of.
You know, I've always been a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. That's why I asked the question.
I agree.
Yeah. And Chad, you're saying, well, there's communities out there, trust me, that have minimum number of nights. Well, what communities are they? Give us some examples.
There are these spreadsheet provided.
Okay.
That's in there.
Do not reinvent the wheel. Do not reinvent the wheel when the wheel is attached to a vehicle like yours. That's what I always say. It's not. They're not. So we need a different wheel. We need a wheel that you all think is the right wheel for this community.
So based on your information in these other communities,
yes,
that are more like us, what is that number?
Well, it runs all the way from, let's say, Idaho Springs, which has 15 units in town limits, and it goes all the way up to, let's say, a good number of them that have no limit. So on. It's saying that there is there is no one size fits all, and that's the unfortunate reality that. If there was a clear-cut information of this is the number that I recommend and this is the way that the town should operate as a matter of best principle, that short-term rentals being alike across all communities in the U.S., I'd be happy to provide that information. But it's a unique situation and unique community. So I hesitate to. There is no one size fits all or one community that we can say for one. Blue River is this community.
I think based on our resources, staff levels, roads, everything, to me, 20%, I would go to 20% cap and come up with compliance and see if we can make that work. That's why I'm with a 20%. I just want to make sure what we're doing is going to work before and if we just say there's no cap, then we don't know if we can handle it. And I don't think we can, especially on the staff levels that we have now. I mean, this is this topic that never goes away. Like, I would like a moment for it to just not go like for us to be able to see if it works. And I think with a cap of 20%, we can figure out if it's going to work. And if it works, you know what, but we don't have a cap, then anyway.
Well, Jody,
you know what
I appreciate you giving that consideration, and I agree with you on everything else that you said. In terms of this minimum night stay, though, they want direction on what to do. I don't know.
We already have a 10-night minimum.
Minimum is a little bit easier for handling. The maximum is a little bit more of a difficult situation.
Let's just
Yeah.
go down the line, I think, a little bit. And then if that's okay. Yeah, we could go down the line with this, so let's just get, if we can get through number 2.
I have one more question. Sure. Just because of, looking at data. Bob, what is your opinion of it says Avon rules of full license, limited license, resident occupied license, and their restrictions?
So
Avon has a full license, a limited license, and a resident occupied license. How they're restricted. What is your opinion of that?
very sophisticated system because they have a really sophisticated commercial operation and a need to support tourism to a big degree. So they have a very sophisticated system, which I kind of like from an academic standpoint. Looking at it's like, wow, that's cool. But it doesn't work for no commercial community. We could look at things like, well, let's do a Class A license in which those people can rent as many nights as they want during the course of the year. How many licenses should we issue? Well, maybe this community can handle 15 of those in each zone, or 10 in each zone. I mean, you could do those kind of numbers, play with that issue, and then say everybody else is on the outside. They only get a Class B license and they can only rent a maximum of 90 nights per year. You could do that kind of sophistication, but I don't even know if we're there at that level, Jonathan, because we don't know what we can enforce. And so the idea of going to a 20% cap, which is not a moratorium, but it effectively kind of operates that a little bit like that, saying 20% is our maximum or cap. And let's figure out over the course of the year how much money, time, effort, and staff we need to throw at this to make the system work. That's what it needs to be, that 20 number. Because you're going to have to encounter the issue of money and time, staff, to figure out what we can enforce to make things work in this community so that we don't have complaints or have complaints. And maybe after you throw the money and then get the staff in place and the software, in 1 year you'll say, hey, we're operating smoothly. Let's go to 25. You don't know. I doubt it.
I bet you don't. Are you a betting person?
I'm going to tell you that you don't have the stomach to spend the amount of money it's going to take to make sure that we can manage 20%. I'm just telling you that straight up from what I've experienced.
So Bob, we already talked about code enforcement officer. We had a code enforcement officer last year or the year before that we had hired, and we agreed to do that as board of trustees. And that's something that we've already kind of said we want to do. And it's not just for short-term rentals.
No.
And we got a police department that can help in this situation. We've already got them on the payroll.
And
now the only other expense that we are talking about here is $90,000 a year for a software program. That's it. And you don't think we can afford that?
I would say absolutely can afford it if that person were in place today and they were sitting there at the desk saying, I've got extra time to spend on this kind of stuff. I don't know what it's going to play out to be. I don't know how much. I'm not the manager. I can't tell you that a staff member can handle the workload that we need to make sure that all the applications get processed quickly, efficiently. We go out there and inspect properties, make sure they're operating, and then we handle complaints. I don't know.
The software
That's the intent.
It does a lot. It does a lot of the one-to-one compliance related through metrics related to lodging tax reports and things of that nature. Like the one-to-one-ing, figuring out whether or not what is being reported is generally accurate to the revenue estimates that they
software. I thought the software, a big part of it was combing the internet.
Correct, and that too. Yes,
that's a big compliance. Yes. That's what we're finding. No compliance is people going on the internet saying people are not. They're renting the river, but they're not. They don't have a license. The software specifically is going to address that.
Yes, and they give us that information, and I write a letter, and it says you're operating without a license. You're hereby revoked forever and ever for a day. And if you don't like it, you can appeal, and then we have an appeal process. That's that process to get those people off.
Can we do a fine and a lien on the property?
We can do a penalty.
Yeah. You'll be surprised. Right.
We can do a penalty. We can do a penalty, then we have to enforce the penalty.
Can we have a more streamlined process, Bob? Can we have a more streamlined
process?
I'm working on that.
Like,
I want it to be a streamlined
generic letter written by you one time.
Yes,
that's the goal here. That we have processes and procedures, and basically you can slot someone into that job and get them to do the work.
But when you tell them there's a penalty involved, they have a right to appeal. Yes, we have to set that system up. Okay, can we make it as streamlined as possible? Yes, we can. Can we pass those costs of appeal on to the individual? Absolutely. That's all part of the enforcement. But it takes time and I'm sorry. You can't just.
I get that, but we have no problem spending money on other things, so let's do it.
We do. We got plenty of money with taxpayers and.
I'm not talking about being frivolous and irresponsible, but.
Yeah, I think we can get there. We need to run the course on getting enforcement to make sure it works so we know how much we can and how much you're willing to pay for this taxpayers. How much money do you want to spend on this, right? I hire 5 people tomorrow. I can't do that.
So I read through this. It's been more than a minute though, and I didn't study it, memorize it, or I wouldn't get an A if you tested me on it today. My question is, does this replace Citizen Portal?
It migrates the short-term rental component of Citizen Service. Citizen Service is going to stick around for other related permit items.
Or at least that's the
it works well for
a lot of people in the community.
It works for specific procedures, but we have a very wide net that we capture on Citizen Serve, and some of the intake procedures need to be refined as well. So yes, we remove that. That is something that we're trying to separate off into new mode.
Well, I'm concerned about the people that have licenses now, including the ones that need to be grandfathered that we discussed previously. And things go into junk emails and whatever. And I know the issues that I've had with Citizen Serve or the Citizen Portal, whatever you want to call it. I don't use it. I come here when I have a question or an issue. I just come here, but I have the benefit of living 3 minutes away. And there are people that own these properties that live out of state. So I am interested in learning more about how that works and how this is going to help us with that, because it seems like he's had a lot of work to do every year when the licenses, during that period of time. I'm also interested in expanding that period of time, perhaps moving it to the left on the calendar so that there's more time for people to get their ducks in a row and more time for staff to say, you're missing your proof of insurance or whatever. So along with streamlining, I think that part needs to be looked at and streamlined as well, so that it's easier for these people.
I would make the note that I generally agree with that principle, with the note that if we have a wider renewal window, that once that renewal window closes, we don't offer the same amount of grace that we traditionally have of months of reaching out following the renewal window. It being a separate issue.
Well, I don't have an issue with that, because the guy that came in here, and I don't know if you're here tonight or not, and I'm not trying to point anyone specifically out, but he compared it to the library. The library tells me that I have a late fee. Well, back to my point of these are businesses. If you're running a business in the town of Blue River, it behooves you, if you want to continue maintaining the status quo of your business, that you have all of your ducks in a row and your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Having some more time to have those document. It's not having more time to have those. I mean, if be the library was my point of bringing up that analogy, not the guy who gets the late fee. Be the library who's sending out the late fees. If anyone here even remembers that analogy. Be the library. Don't be the guy that gets the late notice from the library. So that you're running a business, you should have all of those documents. If there's 5 of them, all 5 of them, and you should be submitting them, and you should be running your business efficiently because it's your business. And that's what the library was doing, to my mind, when whoever that was that brought that up. So my point of by moving it left on the calendar, if someone is missing something, then they have more time to react and get that stuff in. And also, if they're trying to do it from Tennessee on Citizen Portal may well be the issue part of the time. And I'm interested in fixing that.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I don't disagree.
Chad and I have kicked this issue, and this is another kind of 2.0 issue on the whole thing. We've talked a little bit about going to a 2-year license.
Yes.
With a mandatory application mid-year in the year that you're going to expire. So we get it in early, so we can process it. But we talked about ways to alleviate or lighten up the administrative burden of processing this and not going to a 1-year program. We did the 1 year program back in the day because the board was of the idea that we would only try out FTRs for a while, and if it didn't work, we just killed the program. We didn't want to hang it out there for too many years.
Oh, well,
That's long gone. That dog's, well, that's true. The horse stuff. So maybe a 2 year program, 2 year license, in which they have to apply early, and we have very specific mandatory requirements they must submit. If they don't get it, they don't get the license. We have a lot of people saying, "Oh, I didn't get that one document in, so give me some reprieve here." It's like, no, this has got to be black and white. You didn't do it, you don't get it.
I concur.
And let's push that issue of how we're going to administrate it
Sure.
in the future, as well as what we're going to do about this idea that I exercise good faith and therefore give me a license. We'll have to do it secondarily, but let's get to the point of what ordinance do you want to see in front of you? You're going to debate as to what's there. We've heard 20% tonight. This is why we still need to
Yeah,
get
so
the
circling
resolution.
back,
So yeah,
we're
Or a two.
circling back to, on caps. Ari, you said you would go with 20?
Yes.
10? Would you do a 20%?
Yes.
Heather?
With the
Nope.
exception of condos.
Oh,
I don't want them
condos.
to
They're
go
in
up to 20% and suddenly get a bunch in that density.
Yeah, so I think that's a point in here, if I remember right.
and the only reason that's there is because
Condo
condo operations, they're more inclined to kind of accept amounts of short-term rentals, at least in the Denver metro area and other places that work. Condos are, so if you want to make a higher number for condos, because that's the nature of condos.
Actually, that was not the reason. We did it because it's multifamily. We tried in our zone, when we made zones, we tried to put an equal number of properties in those zones. It was close enough to the states. We thought it should be, and I don't know how many condos are included or condos.
36.
It didn't seem reasonable. Add that in any of the zones and make them their own zone. Because there's
Licensed and operating ones in there. And it says 38 total, in the building.
Since each one in the condos too.
Well, that would add several more units, so.
Well,
Not several, I don't think.
I think only one more would fall under, if I'm doing the math there. It'd be seven out of 36, then if you hit the 20%. So if we want to do more, we'll have to have that as its own.
At 20%.
Yeah, consideration, yeah, so it'd be
It sounds like
seven would be the closest, because 8 would go over ahead.
maybe one more rental.
No,
It's
sorry.
yeah, one. I'm not.
Only one more rental.
Keep this math, I'm good.
Leave it at 20.
20, okay.
And then
I
just
said
use
no,
everything.
Ben?
I'm fine, like I said, it's a placeholder to me, it doesn't mean here as much, it's a starting point.
Right, so we're just giving direction.
Yep.
So we can go 20.
Yeah.
Okay. Grandfathering of current license STRs, I believe we said that yes, any existing license can continue in their zone, providing they had a license and that they were paid with taxes.
And they comply with the
And
requirements for
comply with the
new
requirements to get a new license, yeah.
It's not automatic.
So I think we're all in consensus with that, correct? Grandfathering,
We're not limiting the licenses at our.
filling out the license correctly, if they fill out the license correctly within the amount of time, whatever.
Yeah.
it is.
We're very happy you made that decision because we don't want to go to a system where people have to go into a lottery here.
No.
So that's not.
Four. Program for applications of new licenses in the zone is under the count. I thought we talked about lottery, given somebody, you have like a certain amount of days to get the lottery, and then after that amount of time, then it's first come, first serve after that. Is that what I understood? Like, so there would be a lottery, and then as new people come along, right, for the wait list?
The methodologies are too, it's like you could say, okay, we're gonna be at 20%. Should you want a license in that zone, you need to submit your request now. And if you're first in, it's first come, first serve, that's one system. So basically say the door's open, everybody who wants one, get on the list, and first in is the winner and is the loser. Or you could say, here's a window, when we get an opening, you want to be in the lottery, put your name in now between this period of time, and then you'll get a ball in the lottery.
How about a combination, we do first come, first serve, and if it exceeds the percentage, then we go to the lottery.
We could do that too. But if there's a lottery, then everybody gets the ball picked. So it's,
It kind of creates a frenzy though. in a way.
Would I be of the understanding that the general consensus is to avoid the concept of a wait list maintained for say a number of years until is that something the board is generally prefers the lottery or the first come first served method that's being discussed?
So maybe now, if we have to do it, but I think moving forward, when there's a subdivision like Timber Creek Estates on these eddies, because that's way over, there's a wait list. What's wrong with that? I don't understand what the problem is. And I mean, doing a lottery every time.
You start going to that wait list and people have sold their homes and other stuff.
It gets stale.
Dealing with those factors.
But if you also do a lottery every year, right, for people on a wait list, then someone who bought their house this year and somebody who's waiting who bought it 6 years ago, I mean, that's not, to me, that doesn't seem fair.
So then, can we see how the other piece looks? Because I've never heard of that before. So if you do the lottery system, attrition brings you down to, let's just say you're at 19%, whatever that is. You say, okay, we can now do a license. Let's send a letter out to all the homeowners in Timber Creek Estates, and we're going to do a lottery. You got 2 weeks to get your name in the pot, and then we're going to do a lottery. I just don't. Is that how it works?
It'd be a longer period of time, 2 weeks.
But that's basically.
Yeah, it's basically you notify that you've got available licenses. You want to be in the pot, be considered for the license. Yes, I do.
Administratively, that seems pretty cumbersome.
Cumbersome to maintain the list, cumbersome to maintain the lottery, but you're going to have opportunities where people they'll have an opportunity to get a license, and you're going to want to, how you give it out.
I'm a big fan of the wait list. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe some people are going to go away, they've sold their property, but there's still going to be probably enough people on the wait list.
Do you cap the wait
list?
Because the nice thing about the wait list is that go as many people as.
Pardon me?
Do you cap the wait list, or are you just letting anyone?
No, I just let as many people want it as they want. But it's first come, first.
Because you have to pick up the phone and say, "I've got a license available. You're first in the list. You want it? No. They go number 2, number 3, number 4.
Well, and I would say it's up to the person who's on the wait list to update the contact info. Absolutely. If their contact info isn't accurate, then it's.
Would you look at ownership of that property first? Make sure.
That's also another administrative item, yes.
Or the property.
Here's another thought, because I think initially we do a wait list, and people already email saying, I want to be put on the wait list. So, and if we do it that way and we say, okay, first come, first served, then they go, I didn't know, I was on vacation and I didn't. So if initially for each zone, we do a lottery to be on the wait list if it's there. Initially. So we put into effect these zones and these percentages. And let's just say you have a zone now that is capped. That zone be allowed a certain amount of time to do a lottery to get your name on the wait list if you want to be on there. And then we don't need to do that again, because then the people are going to say, well, I really wanted to be, I even emailed you before you even got through this ordinance or this moratorium thing. So maybe in those zones, like I'll just use Timber Creek Estates as an example again. Do a lottery to get on the wait list. That way people can't say it wasn't fair. And I really wanted, I was out of town, I didn't know. The email, by email, I don't know.
If we were to do a pure wait list, I would certainly say there's a certain date we'd have to enact of saying this is the start date you're available to be placed on a wait list. For example, if it's January 1st, 2027. So like, and that theoretical thing, 1/1/2027 is the start of the generating of the wait list. Instead of just getting them trickling in right now before an ordinance comes.
So the orders, the lottery is just in placement on the wait list.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So in other words, the ordinance gets effective, is adopted in October of this year. And in that ordinance, it says, for when there's availability of a license, here's how the town's going to proceed. And it goes with, say, January 1, when the license is available, you submit your request for to get in the lottery, and then it closes January 30th, and then we pick who's going to be on the lottery first, second, third, fourth, and after that, people can just add this stuff. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that.
Administratively, I mean, I just don't think we have to make this like a brain surgery.
Well, and how did you
And
get?
I have no
that?
searches, I'll tell you that.
Email or phone calls or?
I have no searches.
Figure that out. Well, but what's important for you to say is that you want to have a system by which people can get in on a fair basis, to get availability for a license that may become available when you get below 20%. That's what you've said. Yeah. Or I address.
I-
Yeah.
I like your idea.
And then it says in your program,
It actually.
the next one says program for application of new licenses, if it don't, if you can touch that. So direction of staff to the person in the draft and care ordinance for the general.
Can I go back?
Yes.
No. And I've never liked this. I don't know that I have a solution or anybody else does. But I've never liked it. Once you have that license, it's just yours. I've never liked that. And I don't know if there's any way to accomplish it, any way to do it, but your license never expires, right? That you can hold this license for the next 40 years, right? As long as you're renewing it, you're fine. And I don't know what the attrition is going to look like. I don't know what our fines and penalties, all this stuff, how many licenses we're going to lose. But I've never liked, and I said before, the system where these, pick a number, right? It says these 250 people have these licenses, and they just keep it forever. And then it's never afforded anybody else gets that right to rent their property because these people already have all these licenses and they own them and they're not getting rid. So I don't know if there's a possibility for a license to expire or a number of times that you can renew. I love the idea of a 2-year license. I think that makes way more sense than anything we've ever done. That renews halfway through. Because if you don't renew or if something happens, you have a year's worth of rentals to go through and then you're done, right? It doesn't put this weird line in the sand and says, oh, January 1st, you're out of luck. Sorry, I know you booked out the entire winter season. But I've never liked that a license can stay, like, what's Breckenridge's wait list right now?
Who's? Breckenridge?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there's different zones. The Highlands.
There's some zones that don't, some have hundreds of
Well,
sitting in the wait
just
list.
as a number, the Highlands for Zone 3, which is a lot of the residential. They say the wait list is long enough that realistically by attrition that they can be made on by 10 years before the next person on the wait list is
Has the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right, before there's a lottery or whatever.
Yeah, 10 years
they do
before the
that.
first person on the wait
And
list.
I've never, if people want to realize their homes for certain things, whether it's to pay bills, whether it's to make money, whatever it is, I just don't like that. If you're locked in, and all your other neighbors just kind of sit around and look at you and go, well, I can never do that. I don't get the opportunity to ever do that.
And that's more likely when you have the kind of corporate ownership. They'll keep that forever because it's investment, right? So it's a business. So the issue becomes one of, do you want to say to somebody, okay, get a license and you renew it, you can only renew it for 4 more times, 5 years total, and then you're out. Is that fair?
Right.
Is invested in that property, or that's a question I ask all of you. Is that a fair?
I have, generally speaking, Ben, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but I think the thing that keeps popping in my mind is the generous owner. They have had this house for a long time, and they want to give it to their kids. And they've been maintaining their short-term, like they've rent a maximum number of nights, a minimum number of nights. But the intent is to give it to kids when they go. But the kids can't afford the expenses. And I've heard these stories before, and keeping that license active could be the difference between those children of the original being able to keep the property or not. That's the only part of that.
I agree with
Taking
that.
away
Somebody that lives here, or you can weigh that, right? So weigh that against the other neighbor who never has that opportunity.
But I just don't think that's gonna
I know,
happen.
but you can't say one is likely, one is unlikely. Exactly. So if you have one neighbor who says, I can keep this house and I can leave it to my kids if I'm able to rent it, but I can never get a short-term license. So which
At
kids
least
are
they're
more
going
valuable?
I guess then I guess you feel like it might be a potential problem more than I.
And it may not be. And I'm willing to admit that it may not be a problem, right? We may have these licenses turn over in a fashion that it's not a problem. But I've never liked, these people have the right to do this and you don't.
I think that 10-day maximum that you've got to use your license in order to maintain it is a good rule. It helps. I think that's why it was put in place, so people didn't just.
The Ford licenses.
Absolutely. And I think that was a good start. Maybe it gets up to 2 weeks. I don't know. Why 10 days was, I don't know, but that's what it was picked. I thought that was a good idea to try to prevent that. So.
I have this issue that you're raising, but one of the complexities is this. If me and my wife own a house and we've been short-term renting, renew, we both die. License is dead. Okay? The only way to give that license length into the family is through a trust.
Would that then
which they can create, right? Which they can create and hold a license, trust and hold a license. Yes, they have to convert to that if they want to run it to their family. Otherwise, when they die.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just understand that as an aspect of what you're talking about. That you have to create this system.
You have to curate that chain. Or to go, if you don't do that, then the kids are out, unfortunately. You don't have a trust, or I don't think an LLC counts or does it.
You could play with that too. Yeah, you can divide it up in percentage. So it'll continue.
Well, like I said, I don't have a solution for it. I just never liked that scenario.
Can we hold that on chalkboard?
Sure, absolutely.
And maybe, because that's something we can do in the future, as far as shortening the duration of that ownership at the time. But it's an issue that probably complicates this right now, but let's reattach to it.
B, direction of staff. Next one is maximum and minimums for annual rental rates.
I already know minimums of 10.
No, for 10.
So,
for number's sake, I asked John to send me the tax numbers, paid tax numbers for 2025. And the average was 107. The average rental is 170. 75% rented 154 days or less. There was 46 houses that rented over 200 days.
This is data this was data that the report that was pulled by Citizen Serve on the back end.
What was the max?
297.
Almost 300.
Yep.
And the average was 60.
Average 107.
And I will make the note, this is self-reported via lodging tax.
And that's the only way we.
It's the only way we know at this moment.
That's what we have to kind of.
Yeah, so that's our standard right now of operation to base off of.
So at the end of this next period, whatever we call this, October to October, will the new software, will the new things we're putting in place, will we have a better grasp on what that number really is?
In the sense that it is able to flag, it may not be able to flag typed items, but if it's a huge discrepancy, that it has the capacity to at least flag that, and we would have to then approve them for auditing purposes to go down that rabbit hole. They can flag items for our review.
One thing that I researched, and I'm not 100%, but it looks like it confirms that you are collecting that tax in the first place. So right now, we have not confirmed that anybody collects the 3.4%, or any taxes. So the software, at least, so if you're collecting the tax and the homeowner keeps it for themselves, I would imagine that would be a problem on a bigger scale, but the software at least will flag people who don't even collect the tax number. So, there are houses in here with 0 recorded days, and they're my neighbor, and that's not true. So what these numbers are, they correct or aren't they? I don't know, but these are the only numbers we have to go off of.
Yeah.
Are these numbers correct? I don't know. Average 170.
Oh, that's okay.
107. 75% rented, 154 days or fewer, 46 on over 100 or 200. So that's just stats.
I'm gonna shoot a different idea across the bow, because this one, to me, a lot of the reason, big reason we're having this conversation are those people that are really abusing, like, somebody has to put up with. We don't want them. And from what I've heard, and I think it makes sense, the more bookings that you have in a short, like you encourage 2-3 night stays, that's more people going. And that's a lot of what's got people not happy about, is all these people coming and going out of that property. one of the ideas that we may want to consider, just a thought outside the box, is going back to account. Let's just say you pick a number. I think the county uses a maximum of 35 bookings per year. So one of the questions I want to ask you, Chad, is it easier for the system to track the number of bookings or the number of nights, or neither? Because if let's just say,
I'll be able to get you an answer once I have a rough
I'm
model
just going to
back
use
to me
this
on
as,
it.
I mean, that seems to me like if you say, I want to put a number on the maximum number of bookings. Booking could be 2 nights, 3 nights, 5 nights, 10 nights.
Sure.
But what I think the intent, what happens is that it encourages the person who has the home to do a booking for a longer period of time rather than a 3, because they burn up one, they do a 3-night stay, that's one.
So regulate their own minimums to make sense for.
They
the
do whatever they
35
want. Well, but we put down something that says you're allowed a certain number of bookings per year. A booking can be however many nights you want. Under 30 days, I guess.
Yeah, that would probably be more. That would be something I'd have to get a rough model from Pneumo before I know how it approaches it one way versus the other. The conversations have been more focused, admittedly, on number of nights in the year, just because it's a more common metric. But I'm not saying it precludes the ability of software to do it.
And the number is easier from a software standpoint because it's a
Number of
calendar, right? So your calendar on
Number of
VRBO is the same as your calendar on Airbnb, is the same as the calendar on your personal website. So it's able to track nights easier than bookings because it's a calendar, not a. It can't see your reservations.
I look at calendars all the time, and there's a breakoff point. There's a check out, check in on these calendars.
But the software can't catch that, right? So it's by nights.
And how does it do nights?
Because
like each.
Well, I know, but if you have a
per
same
night.
day arrival as a same day checkout, that's not going to look like a booking.
But you're saying the computer.
I don't know. I don't have the software. I'm saying what most softwares can detect.
I think I go back to the idea that what we're trying to accomplish here is less people coming home, discouraging shorter night stays, because those are it's disturbing to a lot of the neighbors who don't rent. Am I correct?
Yes.
So how do we do that? Do we limit the number of? I guess it would.
That's the next one on our list here, direction to staff or incorporation, minimum and maximum for annual rental nights, and the very next one is minimum length of a rental stay. It's right there.
I see that.
So, I mean, that's basically what you're addressing, right?
Well,
minimum length of rental stay.
We agree on the minimum number of nights a year right now.
Right, we haven't even got to a maximum number.
But that's
right?
what we're discussing. We're talking about.
Well, you're folding in the minimum length of stay into that. It sounds like to me.
Well, isn't that what number of days per rental stay is? Number 2? Well, I'm just saying another idea might be to incorporate rather than do it. I think what it would come down to, in my mind, because I don't think it's a bad thing. Because my goal here too is to make sure the neighbors aren't being disturbed by constant people coming and going. Is if the software says this is that easier way, then that way we should know that, and maybe that's will help us make that decision.
So what I'm hearing you saying, and we'll see if the board agrees, is that you'd like to have the ordinance compress the amount of nights that the property is rented out during the course of a year, whether that compression is based upon maximum number of nights in a year or maximum number of bookings in a year. That's a question for the software to tell us it's easier to administer, but you want to do that in the ordinance. You don't want to have the ability for someone to rent out the entire calendar year. And also you don't want to see really short turnarounds, like 2 days.
I'm not sure I want to, it's bookings. It's based on bookings, not number of nights. I don't want to see, I think we need to get away from 2 and 3 night stays, because what everybody I talk to about this subject, that's what bothers them a lot about these bookings. If there was a longer stay, it's not as disruptive to the neighborhood, and that's one of our primary goals. So whether it's by bookings, you say, and I'm not saying 35 is the number, the county uses, you're allowed 35 bookings a year. You decide on the number of nights, but logically, if people are trying to make enough money whatever, they're gonna try to make it a longer stay. That's all.
Can we,
And if
can
it's-
we play with that issue? Because I like where you're going, but I don't think we can work that out right now, but we could probably figure out.
I can try to get direction from Dumo to figure out how either of those options would play out once we get.
But that's just a thought.
Yeah.
The other one you wanted to address though was establish 2, 3, 4, 5 minimum stays. And how do you, it's management. I'm trying to lighten your load, make it realistic to manage this.
Yeah.
So, whatever. We may not be prepared to make that decision right now. I don't know.
No, but see how these interplace. Like you could say that you cannot book out, you cannot have more than 35 bookings in a year. And no one booking can be less than, can be 2 nights or less. And you could do that kind of combination, right?
Yeah.
If you have 35 bookings and you have a 7-night minimum, that's 245 days. I don't know how that's not intrusive. I'm just saying, that's just math.
Okay,
But
how many bookings, so what we don't know is how many
Days.
individual bookings is that? If it's a person that's renting the place for a whole month on family, or no, it wouldn't be a month, because that would be a short term, but let's just say 25 days. 20 days. That's not as much of an impact as a new booking coming in every 2 days, right?
I agree.
That's what I'm trying to.
But like, what's the
Unfortunately,
impact?
we don't scrape that data right now, so we can't tell you how many bookings exist.
You can't, but that's why we're getting.
Yeah, that's why exactly. Yeah.
And I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, the math numbers for me are coming to half the reason I still short-term rent my house, because it's getting to the point where I would make more money because I wouldn't pay the town taxes. Long-term renting, but I want to have my friends and family be able to come visit me, and I live on my property. So for me, that is a big allure. And just doing quick math on my rentals, I probably had this year we'll probably have almost 200 days rented. But then I also, if we're talking about occupancy, we'll have 6 or 8 friend groups come and stay for 4 to 7 days separate. Does that impact people? Is that allowed or not allowed?
Is it a short-term rental or just friends
No, it's
staying?
just his friends.
It's just my friends staying, so I don't charge them anything.
Does
They
that
come and
count?
stay. But see, does that count?
I
That
don't
counts.
think it should.
That counts towards the. That doesn't count as rentals, but that counts towards the occupancy. We're saying of people coming and
I
going.
think it's paying
Yes, exactly. Having friends stay over that aren't paying.
Yeah, correct. But still,
Not a rental.
it's we're talking about
impact.
people coming and going in.
Oh yeah,
Of-
and as would.
I mean, they're gonna have a rental car. I'm not going to pick them up.
I get it. I get what you're
Same
saying.
thing would be true if you had a house and you let your friends stay a lot, right? It doesn't count as a rental and has impact on the neighborhood. That's part of homeownership.
But a long-term rental is probably more impact on the neighborhood than anything, because there's going to be people in every bedroom and have 3 or 4 cars, and they're going to be coming and going every day to say work.
How often are your
But that's
stays 2 or more days or less than?
I have a 4 night
single
minimum,
night? You have a 4-night minimum.
and I have a lot of winter ones that are probably 6 or 7 days.
You was one I was gonna ask.
I'll tell you.
I just quick mathed it with the next 2 months being open, or 3 months. Just I have nothing October, nothing November or December yet, and it's just speculating, and it's like 190 to 200.
And you have that many bookings with that 4-night minimum, so it's not
Correct.
impacting your.
Correct. And I don't want somebody there for 2 nights. It's a hassle on resources of the cleaner, everything. It's a hassle.
I mean,
That's my opinion.
I agree with minimums. I think it's the 2-night stays that cause the whole biggest issues.
Yeah, Friday, Saturday night
Right,
party.
Saturday night party, right,
can we just stick with that for now?
a minimum. Right, minimum night.
And numbers.
Yeah, that's 2 or 3.
So 3 nights or more.
Johnny's
I think-
4.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
But number 10,
You're gonna.
minimum night stay, what are your thoughts? And
Uh,
what would your number be?
And I like that we could get the data put together right after everything is up and running. See what really exists.
Yeah, I think that's.
But we have to actually set it every 6 months to review it and do something about it.
Well, not in the middle of COVID season.
Well, besides the number here, I didn't say one, but I'll go with 3. Isn't that what you said, Jody?
3.
3's, I'm comfortable with 3.
Go with 4 just because John asked 4. It seems like he's done it as a business. I mean, he does it every
I
day.
would prefer 4, but just because, John, how does that work for you?
Four's great for me.
Yes, you might have 200 nights. That sounds good.
Yeah. And I'd rather people stay longer.
I agree with you, sir. And that's what I think one of the goals is to have less people coming and going, which would be the first one person to stay longer. Right?
Yeah, let me be the devil's advocate. He's a special case. That's how he wants to rent it. But if a rental for a ski weekend, 3 nights seems like a reasonable number, right?
Yeah.
So.
And we're front range people. Primarily it's front range people.
So 3?
I can tell you what I would do if I owned a house, short-term rental, and was doing it. I wouldn't even do short-term rentals. I'd rent it a month at a time to 2 families from Denver for the whole winter. Because I tell you, this is just a joke. The trend is a lot of people, the older people, are coming up for the summers, and they're not using it in the wintertime. And let's just say they do want to use it. But one of those months, the family in Denver says, okay, you use it. But they rent it a month at a time. And this is where I see a lot of the trend going. And they're not even dealing with short. And that's good for everybody. Accomplishes the ability to pay bills.
Unless you get some bad people, then you gotta deal with 30 days.
Yeah, you do. But I deal with long-term rentals on all of our properties anyway. So it's, and not that kind.
A nuisance is a nuisance, right? Whether it's the short-term rental or the long-term rental or anything.
But
If there's bad actors for short-term rentals, we still haven't.
So are we in consensus on 3?
I'm good with 3.
Did you find it? And if I could, given Jonathan's comments about renting for 4 nights and doing it for free, so it's not short-term, I have a list of dates that I would like to hook up with you.
Hey Bob, I can tell you a house. See, that doesn't.
I already told you.
Okay, next. Maximum total occupancy for a short-term rental. Currently, we're 2 plus 2 qualifying bedroom.
What is that? That means 2 people per bedroom plus 2 on a house.
So you have to certify the number of bedrooms as they qualify. They get 2 per
So
bedroom.
3 bedrooms is 6 plus 2.
2 extras.
Now see,
What? I mean,
this is one thing where, because this is going to piggyback on something else I would like us to fight, which Bob's going to tell us now, is I would really like us to fight against the Blue Sanitation District for our citizens because they're ripping us off.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to stick to 2 people per bedroom, and that's it.
Me too.
But that is one thing where I would like the rule to stay, and that's not in agreement with all the other things I think about all of this.
So the difference between what you're saying, John, and what's here is you're just saying not plus 2?
Correct.
So that would be, the only modification would be that would be a downscaling of 2.
What about a loft?
Loft is, unless it's considered a bedroom according to our building code.
That bedroom has a separate door, closet space, egress, ingress window.
So you have a bedroom with
locked
beds in it.
I mean, 50% of mine are 2 people.
I think that
How big are you?
3 bed.
2 people in a 3-bedroom?
A lot of the time.
It's got the features you want, that's what you.
And that would solve some of our environmental concerns.
yes.
And even though Bob could say no, we might be able to fight up a blue for our people on top. Keep getting rid of.
Now, John, I'm on the upper blue.
It's probably good that you're here.
Shots fired. Active.
So,
And aggressive.
I'm not sure how you're getting it. You know,
I think the 2 makes sense for our wells. Wells are based on regular household use. Upper Blue Sanitation wrote a newsletter where they said short-term rentals homes look more like multiplex. They wrote it in 2020, but they said that short-term rentals, the wastewater is more like a multiplex than it is a regular household use. So to me, 2 per bedroom makes sense for both sewer and septic. And the verification with the town assessor of how many bedrooms you have, 2 makes sense to me. Because I think there's some illegal bedrooms out there.
Oh, there's
Spaces. Yes.
And that's a big part of the enforcement that we have to, I think, administration got to follow, is we have to do inspections.
Well, you can also look at.
Can I throw a hypothetical out there? So I come from a family of 6 kids, grew up in a household of 8. And that's not hypothetical, by the way. However, our property at 14 Backland Court, say for example, it had 9 bedrooms and we short-term rented that property, which we don't, but this is a hypothetical. So that would be a total of 18 people that would be able to be there, right? If I were short-term renting that property.
Unless you do.
However, if my family were gathering there, I could have 26, right?
That's not a rental.
I could have 28, right? Because I'm not renting.
I'll let you have 5.
I said, all right, so I could have 24 people. Because I'm not renting it, right? I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you for your time.
Single related people in a single family home, we don't regulate, and it would be brain damage to regulate the number of people who stay there.
Perfect.
The law says the only way we can't do that is we do it based upon an objective like number of bedrooms, okay, or some other square footage standard, and we do it across the board for all. And the reason why no municipality does that is because we're not going to knock on somebody's door and say, I'm sorry, you just had a kid, you got to send one of your kids away to boarding school. We do not do that, so we do not regulate single family occupancy in homes. And by the way, state law changed last year to take our authority away.
I know.
We have to allow
I'm aware of that.
unlimited number of people.
So
Not short-term rental, but families.
So to clarify, so what's on the table is
2 per
2
bedroom.
people per bedroom.
No extra 2.
Yes, per legal bid.
And that's gonna, I guess, yeah, okay, that's verified through the county records.
And or inspection. We do.
Do we is that our intent or is that later?
We have another discussion item to tack on. We don't currently have a methodology of setting this is what we require. And
We're gonna come up with a means by which we do, because we have people saying, I have 2 lofts and therefore their bedrooms, so we gotta get away.
Do we actually all agree on something?
I know, I'm asking, okay.
Where were you at, Barry? Office?
Just because you. So 2 is.
What they're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, not 2 plus 2 or 2.
And just so we solidify this issue for now, is that if I have a 9-bedroom home certified to be bedroom, I can have 18 people.
That's the way I understand it.
Unless you want
Wanna
to
make sure
do
that's clear.
a cap on
Maximums.
maximums.
Let's give this a shot. I think personally.
Yeah, was it?
that that covers 3 and 4 then.
Okay.
Because total occupancy based on environmental concerns is what we address, unless there's another caveat about it you're thinking of, that you can think of that would really be addressed.
These are the keys that we've got to start drafting, so you have something to look at, and the public can look at too. But there's a lot of other issues like the environmental impact issues and everything else that I think has to be kind of a longer term project for the town. I don't think you can noodle on it tonight in days and make a decision, but we do have to handle under the impacts environmentally, not just short-term rentals, but homes generally, right? Water use.
Well, I think the sanitation district probably, as Chad probably knows, is going to be doing a hydrology study for the town anyway, with the idea of maybe abandoning the south plant and running sewer main all the way down to the Iowa Hill.
I did gather a little more specs from them on what that looks like.
This is a septic system, and the state, the only reason the town's considering the Blue River sanitation is considering this because of the regulations. The state is constantly trying to push. At some point, they're going to make us create a plant here that puts clean water into the river rather than a septic system. The costs are prohibitive, and that's why they're considering doing this, running the sewer main, the cost of the sewer main all the way to the plants that do put clean water in the river versus the septic system up here. So just, that's coming. So that question, their study might help us determine some of the things we need to talk about. There's really the only thing that we're talking about. It has no impact on the sanitate the sewer line, but it does have impacts on the water, the wells, the water. That's probably the biggest environmental consideration that we have to make, right?
So we'll look at that, and it's important.
That has to be on the agendas for the future.
And so we can we can fold in Jonathan's concern with Upper Blue into that discussion. Because I'm not sure what the concern is, but I'd like to know.
You've got a bone to pick.
No, there's obviously something.
We'll
discuss that when we need to.
So the next,
Trying to make sure it gets on the agenda, Jonathan.
we need to come up with a
Work session. So we can talk about
Can
policy.
we please just talk about, policy or enforcement?
Enforcement, sorry.
Enforcement.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Can we-
Give you a heart attack.
Enforcement, my brain, yeah.
Oh, we got-
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
The good stuff.
The next steps, next plan is for us to provide you some written draft on what the new ordinance might look like. It's basically the old ordinance but revised substantially. A large portion of that will have to be dedicated to enforcement. But I want you to know that the scheme I'm envisioning that I want to present to you when we get to enforcement is there'll be an ordinance and there'll be a resolution. The resolution will be administrative conduct. Okay, it's not the law, it's how the administration will happen, especially for enforcement. I want to do it in two pieces, like a resolution. It's very easy to modify during the course of the year. Ordinances are. So if you do this administrative or a resolution on administration, which will have a lot of enforcement mechanisms in it, it will be a better system. And then thirdly, there'll be a workbook that will be handed out to all short-term rentals that will have Q&As in it. It'll have all the process and procedures in kind of easy to understand format, because we got to get education out there. And just having them read an ordinance that's drafted for by lawyers and legalese is not the best way to tell people, here's what you got.
No, it's not intentional.
I knew you like that. I knew you would. So that's going to be the third component, but that's after we get everything approved. So you can see an ordinance with red lines in it. Please review it and give comment back. Having crickets is not really helpful sometimes. I'm trying to do things on the floor here. Review the ordinance, and then next is the enforcement. And I ask you to start thinking about the fact that true enforcement, and you've heard that tonight, true enforcement is tough. It's like raising kids.
We took a big step.
Yeah,
when we made that one license per property.
Yes, you took a big step, but the step's going to be bigger. The step's going to be stuff like we're going to send out letters to people who are operating STRs who are not licensed. They're done for 5 years, for example. They can't get a license, period. That's what they bought themselves. And if you're not going to back that kind of tough love, then we need to talk about that. Other things is that there's going to be kind of a tier of I envision it presenting to you a tier of enforcement levels, like a class 1, class 2, and class 3 enforcement process. If you violate a class 1 violation, you lose your license, period. You operate without a license, or you did something very serious. I can't give you all those lists, but the revocation is the number one thing. Done. Continue on. Class 2 is going to be you did something pretty serious and you're going to be suspended. Okay? You cannot lease out your place for a period of time. Like in liquor licensing, we do this a lot. You have to close your bar or restaurant, okay, or liquor store because you served underage people. You have to close. Well, in lieu of closing, you're allowed to take a fine or penalty in lieu of suspension, in which you pay the government basically a portion of your proceeds, so that we can manage these licensees who booked out time, who've been bad actors. They can continue to keep their bookings, but they're going to suffer financially because they're going to pay a portion of their rental to us. We can do that by law. So there's going to be that component for a class 2. Class 3 violation will be situations where you did kind of minor things, but if you did enough minor things, you could be suspended or revoked. And so there's going to be this hierarchy that I'm going to present to you in enforcement. Much of this will be administrative. Okay, we're going to be able to have the administration say, you're a bad actor, here's your penalty, here's your fine, here's your suspension, here's your revocation. And if they don't like that decision administratively, they have a right to appeal. The appeal can go to you all as a body. But we struggled with this last time we did with revocation, and you all had to be in here, and it was kind of cumbersome. We can provide a system by which this appeal is taken to either a subcommittee of you, we draw 3 of you out of a hat, and you make a decision.
People who are making more have to do it.
Hang on, get way out in front here. So there'll be a subcommittee.
I like that.
A subcommittee, and it could be done right away. In other words, we pick the date, we pick your names out, and you have to be here. It's not waiting for a month. Or other communities have done a administrative hearing officer. And this is a person who's usually a lawyer, local lawyer, who will hear the appeal. And all the costs of the appeal are paid by that actor unless they win. So we don't suffer the penalty, and they can get it really right away because this lawyer will be available and we send it to them. They have a hearing in front of this hearing officer. The administration goes and says, here's the problem, here's the defect, and then they have their right to appeal, and they get a decision. If they win, we give them back their appeal money. If they lose, they can go to district court. That's the process.
So it's the same with us, it just
moves it to somebody else that you don't have to show.
I'd like to comment on that, Bob. First of all, I'm prepared to get stripped. Second, I am a big believer that most of the people in short-term rental are good outfitters. And they want us to do this too, because it's these bad people that none of us want, including the people who short-term rent. I also was listening to Lady there, sorry. Louisa.
That was maybe the best email I've had.
And
no offense, Chris, but
and the Palm Springs experience where they started getting heavy, and it really reduced the number of violations. And I think there'll be a couple, maybe appeals, but I think once people understand that we're serious about this, just like, did we get any appeals to the rule we came up with about one license per?
No.
Okay, so no. And that was there were some people who were pretty upset.
That doesn't come into, it comes into effect 27.
It's 27.
The point is, it's coming, Chad. The point is,
yeah, I will.
We made the rule.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
coming.
I don't disagree with that.
You took it off spin, and I applaud you all for doing the right thing.
I hear from that realtor about every 2 weeks about, is there any way we can do this, that, or the other thing?
But to answer your point, or try to address your point, strict regulation, strict enforcement works. That's why people don't speed on streets with cops off, right? It's because they know they're going to get a ticket, right? And so the same thing holds true in any regulation. If the municipality steps up and shows the public that they're serious, you'll get fewer violations. That's just the way it works in life. The reason why we probably have a lot of unlicensed people is because they know we're not watching the door.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it'll change.
Yeah.
And I think I can't speak for the rest, but I'm hired to.
Okay. I just want you to come back in here knowing that there's going to be some tough love on people.
I think if we're representing our community, then they need to, if they're going to appeal, it needs to be right here, and we want to sit there and stand our ground.
But if we have 5 appeals in a month, are you all prepared to come in for extra?
Ben and Heather.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Jonathan's another characters.
I'm prepared to do it.
That's when we pitch that to you, because we're going to have to get serious and have people follow up.
So a subcommittee of 3 draw lots.
Yeah, we would put everybody's name in the hat, and you pick it out, and then if you pass because you're not available, then we pick somebody else, but then you don't have a chance to pass in the future. We have to, show up, right?
Yeah. I'm fully prepared to show up.
And then it's going to be on every one of them.
Everyone. Sure.
Especially in the winter.
All right.
So what is the realistic time frame that we would set up a work session?
I think we need to do these.
Okay. That's fair because the only.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, we got a lot. We've been rolling pretty aggressively, and the only time I would have recommended otherwise would have been the second Tuesday of the month. But that's not enough time to get this out before you guys. So I'd suggest it being the 4th Tuesday, like this.
The 4th Tuesday of September.
Yeah, if we're wanting to stick with the Tuesday policy, just having some consistency.
What are we doing?
So
the next session.
Okay, I'm good with that. And I wanted to ask you a question, Bob, about the process after we come up with this. Is the enforcement included in the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, so can you explain to me what comes? Is there a public hearing process with all this, or do we just?
No, we're not. I mean, we're not required by law to hold a public hearing on ordinances. I mean, that's
okay.
Unbelievable news.
Just tell me when we get a plan. What's the process look like?
You're going to have an ordinance that's sent out to the public. You're going to have an introduction. Right? We're not required to do this, but this is important. We're not required to do any of these processes. The big city process. We're going to have an introduction where you're going to see the final ordinance in front of you, and we're going to explain it to you, and you're going to send it out to the public because you think it needs to go to public hearing. Then we put it out on the wavelength. 2 weeks, a month later, you're going to have a public hearing.
At the regular meeting.
At a regular meeting, a public hearing. You're going to take comment all night long if that's necessary from everybody on the ordinance. And once we're done with that, you'll be asked to vote or send it back for revision.
And then what happens? It becomes a resolution.
It passes an ordinance and it becomes effective. Depends on whether we do it. We're not going to say the emergency word. We could do an emergency order and make it effective right away so that we can keep running. or we'll have to wait 30 days for it to become effective. And that may mess us up for administration a little bit. We'll have to talk about that. But there's going to be a time in which after you approve it, it's going to have to become effective, and then we use that ordinance in the administration of the program.
So is it possible that at the October regular meeting, we might have a public hearing? If we get things wrapped up at this next meeting?
If we are happy with the draft, that would be our hope.
It's possible to have a public hearing.
It'd be tough, but we're going to do it. We have to get this stuff out.
Right. I understand. I'm anxious also just to get wrapped up. And
So the 22nd of September is the next one we're proposing then for the work session.
What's the 20? I thought you said is it the
22nd? Sorry.
5 Tuesdays in September.
Yeah, there's 5. Yeah, it's weird. Because otherwise, the other day we would have done was 8, but we don't really have that ready to go. So the 22nd was the proposed date if we wanted to stay consistent on Tuesdays.
Any other days work better for me, but I'll be here no matter what. Hockey season starts, so I'll be coaching on Tuesday nights for the.
we need you here. So what?
No, I'll be here. I'll get somebody else to cover coaching. If we can do
I'm pretty flexible.
Or we can go to a different day, so you don't have to miss.
I'm already gonna miss one Tuesday a month.
Right.
Regular meetings,
That's why I had 2 that month.
but I'll make whatever.
So I'm going to have to ask you this because of the tight timeline to get everything wrapped up in October. We're going to have to send out drafts to you via email, which are going to be drafts and they're not public information like new law, but they're going to be drafts that I really need you to review and give feedback to. I don't ignore them because there may be in sections like, please review this section, tell me what you think, because we're not going to have time to come back in here and give you the information cold and say, here it is, what do you think? Or we need you to get the mesh. So
it's a direct response to you or?
Yeah, direct to me. Direct to me, it's attorney-client.
Email or phone call or?
Email or phone call is fine, but direct to me, not to the group. Don't send it out.
Yes.
Hey, I think this is great. What do you think? Send it to me. I like this. I don't like this. Change that. I will converse with you as an attorney.
And that goes to you and Chad.
You can copy Chad.
I'll take the information, so feel free to have me.
Copy Chad.
Yeah.
Copy Chad. Tell me what you think of the information.
And you'll give Chad. We don't need to do that. I mean,
I copy Chad. You can copy Chad.
I just want to keep it
To me, CC Chad is fine, or to both of us, but I'm going to ask you questions through this, legal questions, and you're entitled to answer legal questions.
And you're anticipating this after the next special meeting?
I'm going to start working
anytime now.
Next week.
And we're gonna go, you're just gonna send it as you.
As I get through.
Okay, and it might not be in the, it'll just be on different areas that we talked about. What do you think? And the way you're understanding where we are as a group right now.
I may send you a message that says, based upon your decision with regard to zones, please review the following. This is the language I report the ordinance. You'll say thumbs up, but give me something.
Okay.
Not crazy. Say, yes, Bob, this looks great.
Okay.
But help me get it to a form that when you see it in September, you've already kind of gone through much.
Okay.
So you can get a big lift.
Well, it's already a big lift, so let's just get it done.
It's not about me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we can't run government without you.
So, if there's nothing else, maybe a motion to adjourn?
So are we okay with the 22nd being the date?
Yes.
The date of operation for the next special session, special meeting?
Yes, for me.
Okay, because it's the 15th for the regular next month.
Yep, 22nd for the special meeting.
Okay.
I'm a yes.
Okay.
We're doing 22nd, Tuesday, the 22nd, the next Tuesday after the.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the work session.
Before you do, can I say one thing that I've said for 9 years, and I really mean it this time? Please call me if you have questions. I do not charge you for phone calls to ask me questions on things that you're concerned about, okay? Please, you do, okay? All of you are invited to do so, okay? Some of you do a lot, which I appreciate, but please call me if you have something you say. I don't understand this. Let's get it out thoroughly, okay? 9 years I've asked you.
Shoot me a text when you post stuff to our emails.
That was
Yeah, I mean, I check my house right before meeting.
Hey, now you can make
Like to make a motion to adjourn the work session.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.